Chapter 1031. Deterrence. Tilting his head slightly, Duan stared at Dao Can and Yichen quietly. He asked indifferently, "Are you done?" Clearly, Dao Can and Yichen did not expect Juan to be so calm. Under normal circumstances, after they mocked him, the first reaction of others would be to fly into a rage out of humiliation and rage. However, this youth before them was unusually calm, so calm that it was scary. His clear eyes were as calm as water, without any other emotions. "The two of you just think that I am not qualified to take on the role of Sun Clan's guard because my cultivation is low, right?" Juan said before the two could speak. "It is good that you know your place. So, it is better that you do not join us and become a burden," Daokan said coldly. "Brother Daokan is right. This is to prevent you from entering the true Vein Forest and sending yourself to your death." Yichen agreed indifferently. Juan did not reply. He raised his feet and walked towards the two. When he arrived before them, he said indifferently, "Since the two of you keep saying that I, Yun, will be sending myself to my death if I enter the true Vein Forest, could it be that the two of you are very strong? You are just two early-stage golden venerates. In my opinion, the two of you are the ones who will be a burden to this team." "What did you say?" Daokan narrowed his eyes and his aura surged out. Strands of saber light swirled around him like a storm, looking exceptionally horrifying. Yichen also took a step forward and arrived before Juan. A sharp sword light flashed in his eyes. The two of them formed a triangular formation in front of Juan. Their strong auras locked onto Juan. "Looking at the two of you, it seems like you think that I am wrong," Juan said indifferently as he stared at the two before him. "You are just a prime. What qualifications do you have to point fingers at the two of us? So what if you are a student of the Divine Academy?" Daokan snorted coldly and took a step forward. A saber light shot out and turned into a huge saber that was dozens of feet long. The surface of the saber was filled with a spiral chi. It shot out ferociously and chopped at Juan. Juan narrowed his eyes. With a stomp of his foot, his entire body transformed into an illusory figure and disappeared from his original spot, dodging Dao Can's attack. His reaction is quite quick. Broken Saber was stunned. He waved his right hand and the large saber with the spiral chi around it flew into his hand. He stared at Juan with a provocative gaze. "You want to fight?" Juan narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "I just want to show you the might of a golden venerate. I want you to know how weak you are. You are not qualified to join this trip to the true Vein Forest," Daokan said proudly. "I'm not qualified to join? Then let me prove if I'm qualified to join." At this point, a sharp glint flashed across Juan's eyes. With a stomp of his foot, he dashed towards Daokan. His right hand reached behind his back and he pulled out the longsword's soul treasure. Since Yuan had already disguised himself as the black-robed longsword youth, Juan naturally planned to use the longsword as a weapon. However, Juan was not good with swords. Hence, his fighting strength was greatly reduced. Even so, his fighting strength was still much stronger than Daokan's. "You overestimate yourself. Come." Daokan shouted and waved his right hand. Instantly, the large saber in his hand flickered with a terrifying saber light. The saber light condensed into a saber shadow that was dozens of feet long. It descended from the sky and chopped down ferociously. Chop! With a piercing sound, Yin appeared above Dao Can in an instant. He pinched the long sword in his right hand and chopped down ferociously. Terrifying Yuan power gushed out and it was as if the entire world was about to collapse. Dao Can's expression changed slightly. Zhuowen's aura was very terrifying and it made his heart tremble. A crisp shattering sound rang out. When Zhuan chopped down with his sword, the dozens of feet-long saber shadow formed by Dao Can's Yuan power could not withstand a single blow. The moment the saber shadow was shattered, a sharp radiance flashed past Dao Can's body. Subsequently, Dao Can's hand that was holding the saber soared into the sky, bringing with it a stream of fresh blood. "Ah!" Dao Can screamed in pain. He held onto his severed right arm and retreated continuously. His eyes were filled with fear as he stared at Juan in front of him. His eyes were filled with disbelief. The empty space fell into silence. Regardless of whether it was the geniuses from the other factions on Excellent God Island or the middle-aged man and the young lady, they were all stunned. One sword. This supreme being from Excellent God Academy only used one sword to chop off Dao Can's right arm. Everyone knew that although the youth in front of them was only a supreme being, his fighting strength had already reached the golden supreme being level. The middle-aged man, who originally wanted to reject Zhuan and ask Zhuan to leave, had a glint in his eyes. It seemed that this Excellent God Academy student who had accepted this mission was not simple. Now, who is the one who overestimated himself? Who is the one who is not qualified to join this team? Yun held onto his long sword and stared coldly at Dao Can as he spoke word by word. Dao Can clutched his right arm as his face turned pale. Under Zhuowen's sharp gaze, he could not help but take a few steps back. The moment his right arm was chopped off, he had already regretted it in his heart. He regretted that he had mocked this Excellent God Academy student, and even more so, he should not have provoked this youth. However, it was too late to regret now. This was because his right arm, which specialized in using the saber, had been chopped off. In the future, his path of martial arts would be much more complicated. He might even slowly disappear from the crowd because of this. I was blind. Your strength is indeed sufficient for this trip to the true Vein Forest. Master Sun, I, Dao Can, am not strong enough. I will take my leave first. After Dao Can finished speaking, he left the Sun family in a daze. This time, he had accepted the mission from the Sun family in high spirits. He had wanted to use the team to enter the depths of the true Vein Forest and gain some benefits. Unfortunately, because of a quarrel, his right arm had been chopped off and his strength had been greatly reduced. Entering the true Vein Forest was definitely courting death. Seeing Dao Can leave, the middle-aged man did not stop him. After all, Dao Can's right arm had been chopped off and his strength had been greatly reduced. If he joined the team, he would definitely be a burden. As for Yi Chen, the moment Dao Can's right arm had been chopped off, he had silently retreated into the team and did not say a word. His strength was similar to Dao Can's. Even Dao Can had been defeated by Zhuan. Needless to say, Yi Chen was no match for him. Hence, it was best not to provoke this person. Did I allow you to retreat? A cold gaze swept over and stared at Yi Chen, causing the latter's hair to stand on end. After which, Yi Chen slowly lifted his head and saw a pair of cold eyes. He could not help but shiver as he forced a smile and said, "In is strong. I admit defeat. Just now, I was bewitched by Dao Can and spoke rudely. For this, I am willing to apologize on behalf of Brother Zhua. Since Brother Yi is so sincere and wants to apologize to me, why don't you chop off one of your arms? After all, I have already chopped off one of Brother Dao Can's arms. I can't possibly be biased, right?" Zhuowen said indifferently. When Yi Chen heard this, his expression froze. The expressions of the surrounding people also froze. They stared at Zhuowen with strange gazes. This person was really ruthless. After chopping off Dao Can's arm, he actually wanted Yi Chen to chop off one of his arms. Yi Chen forced a smile and said, "Brother Zhua, are you joking?" Zhuowen stared at Yi Chen and continued, "Do I look like I am joking? I will count to 3. If you don't chop off one of your arms, I will help you." Yi Chen's gaze froze. Soon after, he looked at the middle-aged man and said, "Family head son, what do you think about this?" However, the middle-aged man looked up at the sky. Zhuowen was able to defeat a golden sovereign as a sovereign. This person was definitely talented in the Divine Academy and his future was limitless. He was not willing to offend such a person with such potential. Looking at family head son's expression, how could Yi Chen not know what the former was thinking? His face instantly turned pale. 1. Zhuowen silently counted. His cold gaze stared at Yi Chen, causing the latter's body to tremble. 2. A terrifying aura started to surge out of Zhuowen's body. A murderous intent appeared in his eyes. Yi Chen started to retreat continuously, his face pale. 3. At this moment, the murderous intent in Zhuowen's eyes seemed to have materialized. Yi Chen shouted loudly, stomped his foot and turned around to escape. "Do you think you can escape?" Zhuowen coldly snorted. With a stomp of his foot, he instantly flew towards the fleeing Yi Chen. With Zhuowen's speed and strength, Yi Chen would not be able to escape for long before Zhuowen caught up to him. Brother Zhuo, I really didn't mean it. Can you spare me this time? Yi Chen repeatedly begged for mercy. I will give you one more chance. Chop off one of your arms. Otherwise, it won't be as simple as chopping off one of your arms. Zhuowen said indifferently. Yi Chen's face turned pale when he heard this. He gritted his teeth and said, Brother Zhuo, don't go too far. Do you really think that I am not your opponent? As he spoke, Yi Chen shouted loudly. With a pull of his right hand, he immediately pulled out a long sword that shone with a cold light. Then, he brandished the sword with his right hand and his origin energy burst out. It actually turned into a lotus-like sword light around Zhuowen and completely enveloped Zhuowen. On the other hand, Yi Chen hurriedly retreated. Looking at Zhuowen, who was enveloped by the lotus-like sword light, the corners of his mouth revealed a sinister smile. In fact, when Zhuowen approached him, he had already prepared this move. He was ready to unleash it, and it just happened to envelop Zhuowen completely. This move was called the Lotus Sword Light. It was Yi Chen's family's unique skill. When it was unleashed, even an initial Golden Venerable Realm warrior of the same rank would be extremely embarrassed. Although Zhuowen's combat strength was very strong, it would be difficult for him to block this terrifying Lotus Sword Light. Even if he did not die, he would be severely injured. Boom! A golden light burst out. Then, the lotus-like sword light collapsed inch by inch. A figure walked out slowly. He strolled leisurely and came in front of Yi Chen. He stared at Yi Chen with his sharp eyes and said, Is this the move that you secretly prepared? Why is it so weak? Yi Chen's face twitched. This move was his strongest move. However, Zhuowen actually said that it was weak. Swoosh! While Yi Chen was stunned, Zhuowen attacked. He waved his long sword and two cold lights swept out. Suddenly, both of Yi Chen's arms were chopped off. Blood splattered in the air. I have said that I will not simply chop off an arm. Chapter 1032. Medicine Master. A blood-curdling scream filled the sky above the Sun family. Then, Yi Chen's arms were broken and he fell from the sky. His face was extremely pale and his eyes were filled with regret. Now, he was completely crippled. His fate was much more miserable than crippled Dao. On the empty ground, everyone inhaled a breath of cool air when they saw that Yi Chen's arms had been cut off. After which, their gazes once again landed on the indifferent young man floating in the air. Their eyes were already filled with fear. The combat power of the Supreme Being from the Divine College was terrifying. Yi Chen and crippled Dao, who were both in the initial stage of the Golden Supremacy Realm, could not even withstand one blow from him. He was at least in the middle stage of the Golden Supremacy Realm. Brother Iken, the strength of this Jiaoshan Academy student by the name of Zhuowen is pretty good. Being able to possess such fighting strength at the peak of the Sovereign Realm is truly commendable. A young man with his hair tied up said with a faint smile as he crossed his arms and stared at Zhuowen, who was floating in the air. That's not right. Brother Wu Chen, based on the combat strength that Zhuowen displayed just now, he should be around the middle stage of the Golden Venerate Realm. This is indeed not bad for a Supreme Venerate Realm warrior. However, there is still a large gap between him and the two of us. Another green-clothed youth standing beside the bundled-haired youth said in an unconcerned manner. The cultivation of these two youths was very strong. They were the two strongest people in the group and their cultivation had reached the peak of the Golden Exalt Realm. When the surrounding people saw these two youths, they instinctively kept a distance from them. The origins of these two youths were also extraordinary. They were geniuses from the two most powerful cities on the excellent Spirit Island apart from the main city. Iken came from the Heaven West City, and Wu Chen came from the Heaven Martial City. These two individuals were considered as monstrous geniuses in their respective cities. This time, the two of them had accepted the mission from the Sun family with the purpose of gaining experience. Although Zhuowen's battle prowess was rather shocking, it was only enough to catch their eyes. If the two of them were to face Dao Can and Yi Chen, they would be able to directly crush the two of them to death. Sun family head. I should be qualified to accept the mission entrusted by your Sun family, right? Landing slowly on the ground, Yuan stared at the middle-aged man and spoke in a calm voice. Naturally, young Master Zhua has the right to do so. However, that Dao Can and Yichen did not know what was good for them. They actually spoke rudely and said that young Master Zhua does not have the right to do so. They said that you are a burden. Originally, I had planned to teach the two of them a lesson. However, although young Master Zhua's cultivation is not high, his combat power is terrifying. That Yi Chen and crippled Dao could not even take one move from young Master Zhua, as expected of a student from the Divine College. The Sun family head kept giving a thumbs up and a warm smile hung on his face. On the other hand, Yuan looked calm. When crippled Dao and Yi Chen provoked him earlier, he did not see the Sun family head step out to stop them. Now that Yuan had dealt with crippled Dao and Yi Chen, the Sun family head stepped out to speak after the fact. Yuan could not help but despise the Sun family head. However, the Sun family head's reaction was normal. After all, Yuan's cultivation was low. If he did not display his true combat power, who would allow a mere martial saint to sneak into a golden exalted mission and become a burden? Therefore, Yuan did not feel that there was anything wrong with the Sun family head's hypocritical promise. He only despised the Sun family head a little in his heart. Young Master Zhua. Come, let me introduce you to these young talents. These are the genius disciples of some of the major factions on the Divine College Island. The Sun family head pulled Zhuowen over enthusiastically and gave a brief introduction to the group of 20 people on the empty ground. However, there were two people that the Sun family head emphasized. Furthermore, these two people were the strongest in this group. This person is Iken, the second youngest expert in Tianxi City. This person is Wu Qin, the disciple of the heavenly sovereign of chaos in Tianwu City. The Sun family head deliberately pointed at the young man in green and the young man in a ponytail. Zhuowen nodded faintly at the two people without any superfluous expression. The cultivation of these two people should be at the peak of the golden exalted realm. However, whether it was in terms of aura or momentum, they were far inferior to He Tao and Du Tao of the Divine College. In front of He Tao and Du Tao, who were at the peak of the golden exalted realm, Yikan and Wu Chen would probably be unable to withstand a single blow, let alone in front of Zhuowen. Therefore, Yuan did not pay much attention to these two people. Zhuowen's indifferent attitude naturally fell into the eyes of Yikan and Wu Chen. Both of them frowned slightly at the same time. Although Zhuowen's combat strength was not bad, he was only at the sovereign realm after all. However, the way he looked at the two of them was so casual. He did not have the reverence that other sovereigns had towards golden exalted realm martial artists. It seems that after defeating Yi Chen and crippled Blade, this lad's confidence has swelled a lot. Wu Chen snorted coldly and said softly. Yikan was much calmer and said faintly, after all, he is a student of the Divine College. It is natural for him to be a little arrogant. Once he enters the true Vein Forest, this lad's arrogance will be restrained. That's true. This lad is so young. I'm afraid that he has just joined the college not long ago. He definitely has not entered the true Vein Forest. Perhaps he might even lose his life because of his arrogance. Wu Chen grinned. Yikan and Wu Chen did not deliberately lower their voices when they asked and answered the question. Instead, they spoke loudly in front of Zhuowen. It was obvious that they deliberately said it for Zhuowen to hear. However, Zhuowen only smiled faintly and ignored the little tricks of these two people. Instead, he silently returned to the team and waited for the task assigned by the Sun family's patriarch. Whether it was Yi Kan or Wu Chen, Zhuowen really didn't put them in his eyes. Their little tricks, Zhuowen naturally treated them as a joke. As for Xiang, because he was not a member of the group to accept the task, he had been ordered to leave the Sun family by Zhun. Once they entered the true Vein Forest, Yuan could use the communication jade amulet in his hand to summon Xiang Tianzuan back to his side. After the group of 20 people had gathered, Sun family head laughed heartily and said, "Everyone should know that I am the Sun family head, Sun Xing. The person beside me is my daughter, Sun Jia. She is also the newest generation of pharmacists in our Sun family." When these words were spoken, the gazes of many people gathered on the young lady beside Sun Xing. They did not expect that this young lady would actually become the newest generation of alchemists in the Sun family at such a young age. It seemed that this lady had a unique talent in the area of alchemy. Alchemists were the most important people in the Sun family, and the Sun family's most famous channel opening pill required an alchemist to refine. However, it wasn't easy to become an alchemist, because this profession didn't require much effort and relied purely on talent. Only those who were naturally sensitive to the composition of medicine and had mastered exquisite fire control skills were qualified to become pharmacists. Fire control skills could be acquired through practice. However, sensitivity to the composition of medicine was innate and could not be acquired through practice. Therefore, it was not so easy to become a pharmacist. Both conditions were indispensable. The Sun family was a unique family that produced a pharmacist in every generation. Relying on the pharmacist's ability to refine medicine, it was natural for the Sun family to be powerful in Anming City. However, the pharmacists of the Sun family were usually middle-aged and above. Now, it was a young girl who was qualified. Clearly, Sun Jia's talent had been unanimously recognized by the upper echelons of the Sun family. It seems that the Sun family is really going to rise. Such a young pharmacist has actually appeared. Congratulations, Sun family head. Iken laughed heartily. However, most of his gaze was on Sun Jia. Sun Jia was originally a natural beauty. Moreover, she had the identity of a pharmacist. If she could become a partner, it would be greatly beneficial for the cultivator's future cultivation. After all, pharmacists could refine many medicine that could increase cultivation. It could help the cultivator cultivate faster. There were many benefits. Not only Yi Kan, but even Wu Chen and the surrounding people looked at Sun Jia with a strange gaze. Clearly, their thoughts were similar to Yi Kan's. Sun Jia furrowed her brows. She could also feel the strange look in the eyes of these people when they looked at her. These gazes made her feel extremely uncomfortable. It was as if these people were treating her as a rare treasure that everyone wanted to fight over. However, Sun Jia quickly noticed a gaze that was different from the others. This gaze was not as strange as the others. Instead, it was as calm as water and as cold as before. It was as if after hearing her identity as a pharmacist, it was unmoved. When Sun Jia's gaze focused, she discovered that the owner of this calm gaze was actually the student from the Divine Academy, Hyun. The reason why Zhuan was so calm was because his heart already belonged to someone. His mind had long been occupied by Mu Chenxue. Secondly, he had the Sovereign Dragon Cauldron on him. The cauldron contained many pill formulas. If Zhuan wanted pills, he could actually rely on the Sovereign Dragon Cauldron to refine them. Therefore, pharmacists were of little value to him. Hearing Iken's praise, Sun Xing laughed heartily and said, "Young Master Iken's words are too serious. However, this time, I hope that everyone will do their best to help my daughter enter the depths of the true vein forest. I have already prepared the channel opening pills that I promised everyone. As long as we succeed this time, everyone will have a share." When the channel opening pills were mentioned, the eyes of Yi Kan and the rest all lit up. Even Zhuowen had a trace of anticipation in his eyes. The channel opening pills had the additional effect of tempering the meridians. After consuming this pill, Zhuowen's battle strength would undoubtedly rise to another level. When does family head Sun plan to set off? Iken cupped his hands and asked again. Tomorrow morning. Today, everyone should rest and recuperate. Once everything is ready, we will enter the depths of the true vein forest together. This time, I want to remind everyone that the true vein forest is very dangerous. Therefore, it is best to be cautious tomorrow and not fail miserably. Sun Xing cautiously reminded. Chapter 1033. Arrival. The night passed silently. On the morning of the second day, the Sun family's martial arts practice field. The Sun family's patriarch, Sun Xing, stood quietly in the middle of the martial arts practice field. Beside him stood the slender and elegant Sun Jia. In front of the two of them was a group of 20 geniuses led by Yi Kan and Wu Chen from other factions on Excellent God Island. The group of 20 people were ready to go, their auras surging. At the same time, Sun Xing also found 20 guards of Sun Jia, forming a group of 40 people. Standing on the martial arts practice field, it was quite a majestic sight. Sun Xing shouted and led the group of 40 people, leaving in Ming City and heading towards the True Vein Forest in the north. The trees in the True Vein Forest were generally several times taller than ordinary trees. Moreover, these trees were also very different from ordinary trees. The bark on the surface of the trees was like snake scales, with distinct layers, looking extremely strange. This is the snake scale tree. It is the most common tree in the True Vein Forest. The snake scales on its surface are extremely tough. Everyone should be careful. Snake-type metabeasts like to live on the snake scale tree and secretly attack passing ancient martial art practitioners. Sun Xing had already warned everyone when they entered the periphery of the True Vein Forest. The group of 40 people had indeed become exceptionally vigilant. Pairs of vigilant eyes continuously scanned the surrounding dark corners of the dense forest. They tightly gripped the weapons in their hands and secretly raised the yuan power within their bodies, guarding against any danger that could occur in the dark at any time. A Sun family warrior, who was at the back of the group, was suddenly suspended in the air, screaming again and again. Clang, clang, clang. This scream was like a fuse, causing the rest of the warriors in the group to draw their weapons and look behind them. They saw that the Sun family warrior was actually wrapped around by a huge python that was dozens of feet long, lifting him in the air. This python was not weak. Its triangular eyes looked provocatively at the people below, opened its big mouth, and swallowed the Sun family warrior into its stomach in front of everyone's eyes. This bastard! Sun Xing coldly snorted. His feet stomped on the ground, and he shot forward like a great rock spreading its wings. His right hand turned into a claw and fiercely grabbed onto the python's vital point. With a fierce pull, the python was immediately crushed into powder by the powerful force without even having the chance to make a sound. The strength of the pythons in the snake scale tree was generally not high. They were roughly around the Xuanzuan realm. Sun Xing was a peak heavenly venerable, so he naturally crushed them to death with a flip of his hand. Hiss, hiss, hiss. However, the moment the python died, the surrounding snake scale trees began to tremble. Sharp hissing sounds began to spread in the surroundings. Soon after, the crowd was surprised to find that the surrounding snake scale trees were actually crawling out of them. Their bodies were not any weaker than the previous python. Not good. There are actually so many of them. Looks like we're being besieged. Sun Xing took a step in the air and arrived in front of the group. Looking at the countless pythons that appeared around them, his face turned slightly ugly. Looks like we can only fight. Although the strength of these pythons is generally not high, there are too many of them. We have to work together to destroy them before we can continue moving forward. Sun Xing shouted. Immediately, Yi Kan and Wu Chen rushed forward, bursting with powerful auras. They actually intended to single-handedly take on the group of pythons. Both of them were at the peak of the Golden Venerable Realm. Although there were many pythons around them, they could not do anything to them. The rest of the people under Sun Xing's command stood back to protect Sun Jia, blocking the numerous pythons that were flying towards them. Zhuan was also among them. Although he was not weak, there was no need for him to stand out like Yi Kan and Wu Chen. He only needed to blend in with the crowd and slowly clear out the pythons. Why waste his yuan power to fight against the group of pythons? Yi Kan and Wu Chen are indeed geniuses from big cities. They actually single-handedly fought against a group of pythons. It's too terrifying. I wonder when we'll be able to reach their level? In the crowd, the other warriors were dealing with the pythons around them. However, their gazes involuntarily fell on Yi Kan and Wu Chen, who were fighting against the group of pythons. Yi Kan held a long sword in his hand. With a sweep of his sword, countless sword rays burst out. These sword rays were like stars in the sky, sweeping out in all directions. The pythons could not hold on for long under these sword rays and exploded into countless pieces. Wu Chen was not to be outdone. He held 2 sabers in his hands and waved them rapidly. The surroundings were shrouded in terrifying and powerful saber rays. These saber rays swept out in the shape of crescent moons, as if countless moons had been born in an instant. When the pythons came into contact with these saber rays, they were all broken into countless pieces. The attacks released by the two of them were extremely fierce. Even Sun Jia, who was protected in the middle of the crowd, could not help but look at the backs of the two of them. There was a strange look in her beautiful eyes. Since ancient times, beauties loved heroes, let alone a young girl like Sun Jia who loved to fantasize. Naturally, she had also fantasized about love. She had fantasized that her other half would be a world-famous hero. Yi Kan and Wu Chen's fame on the wonderful Spirit Island wasn't small. They were also geniuses born in big cities. Now that they had displayed such strong strength, Sun Jia was still inexperienced. Naturally, she was attracted by the strong attacks of these two, and her heart was surging. Looking at the backs of the two of them, Sun Jia's beautiful eyes could not help but turn. Her gaze fell on the inconspicuous Zhuan in the crowd. Her beautiful eyes were slightly disappointed. Compared to Yi Kan and Wu Chen's background, this Zhuan came from excellent Spirit Island. Undoubtedly, his fame was much greater. However, this boy was not like Yi Kan and Wu Chen, who had displayed such a powerful attack. Obviously, Sun Jia thought that this Zhuan was afraid of the pythons and did not dare to fight alone. Originally, I thought that the students from Excellent Spirit Island would all have powerful talents and imposing auras. I did not expect this boy to be so timid and cowardly. Taking one last glance at Zhuan, who was lazily flying over, Sun Jia secretly sighed in her heart. She no longer paid attention to Zhuan. At this moment, Zhuan's actions had undoubtedly disappointed her. Therefore, she did not intend to pay too much attention to him. Puchi. After an hour of great battle, the group had killed over 1,000 pythons. Perhaps because they were afraid of being killed, the remaining pythons hissed and slowly retreated into the snake scale tree. However, Sun Xing's face was slightly gloomy. This time, only a few of the 20 guards that the Sun family had brought out were left. On the other hand, the group of 20 people who had accepted the mission from the various factions to help the Sun family had only lost one warrior. In fact, this was normal. After all, the strength of the Sun family's guards was generally not high. Most of them were around the Xuanzun realm. However, these 20 guards were the elites of the various factions. Moreover, their cultivations were all at the Golden Exalted Realm and above. A mere python from the Xuanzun realm could not do anything to them. Let's continue forward, Sun Xing said with a gloomy face. He led the way into the depths of the True Vein Forest. Even Sun Xing did not expect that the Sun family's guards had already suffered such heavy losses when they had just reached the outskirts of the True Vein Forest. Sun family head, don't you feel that the True Vein Forest is a little strange today? Suddenly, Iken came in front of Sun Xing and asked. Strange? Sun Xing asked subconsciously. Iken nodded and said, usually, it is impossible for so many python metabeasts to appear at the outskirts of the True Vein Forest. Moreover, as soon as these pythons appeared, they attacked us without any regard for their lives. It was as if they were in a berserk state. There is definitely something fishy about this. Sun Xing was stunned. Only then did he react. Iken was right. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for so many pythons to appear at the outskirts of the True Vein Forest. However, today was especially abnormal. Caw-caw-caw. Suddenly, the unpleasant cawing of crows sounded from the sky above the True Vein Forest. Then, several black crows flapped their wings and left the dense forest. The cawing of crows in broad daylight meant that something bad was going to happen. Hearing the cawing of crows, Sun Xing's frown deepened. The True Vein Forest was indeed very abnormal today. Sun family head, are we still going deeper into the True Vein Forest today? Wu Chen also came in front of Sun Xing and asked cautiously. Sun Xing's eyes flickered. He gritted his teeth and said, with the help of all the young masters, there should not be too much danger in the depths of the True Vein Forest. Let's continue forward. Hearing Sun Xing's words, Wu Chen and Yi Kan frowned slightly. However, they did not refuse. After all, they were entrusted by the Sun family and naturally followed Sun Xing's lead. Zhuan, who was standing in the group, raised his head slightly and frowned. An ominous premonition rose in his heart. He felt that something bad was going to happen in the True Vein Forest. Although he had an ominous feeling in his heart, Yun did not take it to heart. This time, the Sun family team was only going to enter the forest to pick some rare medicinal herbs. There should not be any big problems. Dang dang dang. The team continued to advance into the dense forest. Although they would occasionally encounter some rather crazy meta beasts along the way, with Sun Xing, Yi Kan, and Wu Chen's attacks, the Sun family team was able to defeat them one after another. Of course, the team also suffered some losses. The few remaining guards of the Sun family were completely annihilated. Even Yi Kan and Wu Chen's team of 20 elites lost 5 of them. It could be said to be a heavy loss. As the team went deeper into the dense forest, Zhuowen's frown grew tighter and tighter. This was because the ominous premonition in his mind was becoming more and more clear. It was like a volcano that was about to erupt. Soon, the team arrived at the entrance of a large valley basin. This basin was several miles in size. It was lush and filled with various medicinal herbs. There were black heart grass, silver dragon grass, golden iron wire grass, heavenly stars flower, 8-legged centipede flower, vermilion fruit, and other extremely rare medicinal herbs and elixirs in the outside world. Moreover, the yuan qi here was extremely rich. It actually formed a faint mist above the basin. It was faintly discernible, like a beautiful scenery in the mist. We have finally arrived. This is our Sun family's destination. Chapter 1034. Armored Crocodile. There are so many medicinal herbs. Looking at the various types of medicinal herbs in the basin, many people in the group were moved. Their eyes sparkled, but no one stepped forward to pick them. Before they set off, Sun Xing had already said that the Sun family's group would be the first to pick the medicinal herbs. After picking all the medicinal herbs they needed, they could divide the rest equally among themselves. Sorry for the trouble. Sun Xing cupped his hands towards the crowd, then led Sun Jia into the basin. Wu Chen, Yi Kan and the rest silently stood guard at the entrance of the basin, watching as Sun Jia and Sun Xing continuously selected the medicinal ingredients within the basin. Zhuowen, who was silently standing in the group, narrowed his eyes as he stared at the topography of the basin. He muttered in a low voice, "The yuan qi in this basin is so rich, it's a little unusual." Although Zhuowen knew that the yuan qi in places where there were many medicinal herbs would be extremely rich, the yuan qi in this basin was unusually rich. I'm afraid that there is a small yuan vein at the bottom of this basin that contains a considerable amount of spirit stones. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly rang out in Zhuowen's mind, causing Zhuowen's eyes to narrow slightly. Really? Zhuowen's gaze became serious. If there really was a small yuan vein at the bottom of this basin, it would be enough to cause many practitioners to go crazy. Looking around, Zhuowen realized that most of the people's attention was on the medicinal herbs in the basin, and no one had noticed the abnormality in the yuan qi in the basin. Kid, there are too many people now. If you rashly find the yuan vein, it won't do you any good. Xiao Hei opened her mouth again. Zhuowen nodded his head. His expression did not change as he followed the group and silently waited for Sun Xing and Sun Jia to pick the medicinal herbs. After about 2 hours, Sun Xing and Sun Jia finally finished picking all the medicinal herbs they needed. Then, Yi Kan and Wu Chen took the lead and entered the basin. If they saw any suitable elixirs, they would pick them and put them in their spirit rings. Zhuowen followed the team and strolled casually in the basin. Occasionally, he would encounter suitable elixirs and naturally keep them. However, most of Zhuowen's attention was placed on the concentration of yuan qi in the basin. He knew that the place with the highest concentration was definitely the hidden exit of the yuan vein in the basin. Once the exit of the yuan vein was found, everything would be easy. As long as they dug 3 feet into the ground, they would be able to unearth the yuan vein hidden within. Slowly going deeper into the basin, Zhuowen was guided by Xiao Hei to a place about 2 li away from the entrance of the basin. This position was very close to the center of the basin. When Zhuowen reached this place, Xiao Hei timely stopped him. The location of the elemental vein is right below your feet. Kid, make a mark here. The next time you come here, all you have to do is to dig up this area, Xiao Hei said to Zhuowen cautiously. Okay, let's leave this place first. Otherwise, It would be bad if we arouse the suspicion of others, Huan nodded his head. Soon after, he returned to the exit of the basin as if nothing had happened. Young Master Zhua, you came out so early, why didn't you pick more elixirs? Seeing Zhuan walk out, Sun Xing lightly smiled and asked. Zhuan shook his head and said, most of the elixirs here are of no use to me. It would be a waste to pick more. Hearing this, Sun Xing nodded his head. Although there were many types of elixirs in the basin, most of them were materials that were used in more remote areas. These materials were not of much use to a practitioner. Only in the hands of an alchemist would these materials be able to display their corresponding effects. Standing beside Sun Xing, Sun Jia indifferently glanced at Zhuan. Soon after, her pair of beautiful watery eyes landed on Yi Kan and Wu Chen. Among this group, Yi Kan and Wu Chen were the strongest. Therefore, Sun Jia paid more attention to these two people. As for Zhuan, because he had shrunk into the crowd during their journey, he did not have the slightest bit of heroic spirit. Therefore, Sun Jia treated Zhuan the same way she treated other ordinary practitioners, neither cold nor indifferent. Zhuan naturally did not care about Sun Jia's thoughts and attitude. At this moment, he was thinking about how to sneak out of the Sun family group after they left and return to the basin to dig up the elemental vein hidden here. Let's wait until the Sun family group returns to the Sun family and you receive the channel opening pill. It is still too early to think about the elemental vein now. Xiao He softly advised. Looks like this is the only way. Zhuan nodded and secretly transmitted his voice. After a while, Yi Kan and Wu Chen walked out of the basin one after another. Most of the other 10 people followed behind them. When they walked out, everyone's faces revealed a satisfied expression. Since the elixirs have been harvested, everyone should follow me back to the Sun family. When the time comes, I will definitely give everyone the channel opening pill as their reward. Sun Xing said sincerely. When everyone heard this, their eyes revealed excitement. They had risked their lives to help the Sun family mainly because of the channel opening pill. Now that Sun Xing had promised, their hearts were naturally at ease. Sun Xing said a few more words and led the group back the way they came. What was worth praising was that on the way back, the slim and elegant Sun Jia seemed to be quite close to Yi Kan and Wu Chen. Along the way, the three of them chatted and laughed. Sun Xing silently watched this scene without any displeasure. The strength of the Sun family's pharmacists was generally very low. The family would usually send powerful warriors to protect the family's pharmacists. After all, the pharmacists of the Sun family had the secret formula to refine the channel opening pill. Many forces in Anming City coveted the secret formula of the channel opening pill from the Sun family. Thus, they would send their own warriors to snatch the pharmacists. Some were even more ruthless and would go all out to kill the pharmacists. Therefore, the pharmacists must be protected by powerful warriors. Moreover, this powerful warrior must be very close to them. Therefore, the spouses of the pharmacists of the Sun family were all famous warriors on the auspicious Spirit Island. Sun Jia was in the prime of her youth. This time, the people who accepted the Sun family's commission were basically geniuses from various forces. Whether it was talent or strength, they were all very good and could be considered the best of the best. Therefore, Sun Xing's commission this time had another purpose, and that was to find a good son-in-law for his daughter. With a powerful warrior as her spouse, his daughter's safety in the future would be guaranteed. Why not? Among this group of people, Sun Xing favored Yi Kan and Wu Chen the most. The two of them were only 25 years old and had already reached the peak of the Golden Exalt realm. Their talent was unquestionable. Moreover, their strength wasn't weak in the entire auspicious Spirit Island. Next was Zhuan from the auspicious Spirit Island. Unfortunately, this Zhuan's strength was too weak. He was only in the sovereign realm. Although his battle strength wasn't weak, in Sun Xing's heart, he still wasn't as important as Yi Kan and Wu Chen. In fact, in Sun Xing's heart, the best candidate should be a genius from the auspicious Spirit Island. After all, with the auspicious Spirit Island as their backing, there really wasn't anyone who dared to provoke them. If the auspicious Spirit Island sent a Golden Exalt, perhaps Sun Xing would try his best to matchmake them. Unfortunately, this time, the one who came was only at the peak of the sovereign realm. As for entrusting his daughter to Zhuoan, Sun Xing still felt that it wasn't appropriate. Fortunately, Sun Jia didn't take a fancy to Zhuoan. Instead, she took a fancy to Yi Kan and Wu Chen. When the time came, they only needed to duel to determine the winner. Then, Sun Xing planned to recruit the winner into their Sun Jia. In the group, many people looked enviously at Yi Kan, Wu Chen, and Sun Jia, who were talking and laughing in front of them. Sun Jia's identity as an alchemist was something they coveted. This was an occupation that could create all kinds of amplification medicines. It went without saying that it would be a great help to a cultivator. Unfortunately, their strength and talent were far from Yi Kan and Wu Chen's. It was normal for others to look down on them. Although they were envious in their hearts, they couldn't do anything about it. Rumble. Suddenly, the sound of the earth shaking and the mountains shaking violently. Many people were caught off guard and their footsteps became weak, almost falling to the ground. What's going on? After regaining their senses, everyone's eyes were filled with fear and they couldn't help but shout. Dang dang dang. Dull footsteps sounded in front of them. The footsteps sounded like a mountain crashing down, causing everyone to feel suffocated and extremely uncomfortable. Boom. Then, everyone saw the lush forest in front of them shake violently. Then, it collapsed forward with a crash. Then, a figure the size of a small mountain appeared in front of everyone. It was a huge crocodile that was 400 to 500 feet tall. The scales on its body stood up like black steel. Under the sunlight, it reflected a frightening cold light. Rows of fangs protruded from its bloody mouth. They were deathly white and looked extremely terrifying. The huge crocodile that was the size of a small mountain stared at the people in front of it with its merciless eyes. It opened its bloody mouth and roared fiercely. Suddenly, a fishy smell rushed out. An adult armored crocodile? Looking at the huge crocodile in front of them, Sun Xing and the people behind him changed their expressions. They cursed in their hearts. Why are we so unlucky? We actually encountered such a troublesome and terrifying meta-beast, Sun Xing muttered with a pale face. The armored crocodile's body was like armor and was as strong as black iron. Its defense was extremely terrifying and it was extremely difficult to kill. In addition, the power of the armored crocodile's bloody mouth was also very terrifying. If one was bitten by it, at least one would lose an arm or a leg. In serious cases, one's entire body would be bitten into pieces. Chapter 1035. Shirking the entire team, only Sun Xing had reached the early stage of the Heavenly Master realm. However, this adult armored crocodile was also at the early stage of the Heavenly Master realm. Moreover, its armor was very difficult for an early-stage Heavenly Master to break. Therefore, even Sun Xing would find it extremely difficult to deal with this armored crocodile. Boom, boom. The moment this armored crocodile appeared, another armored crocodile of the same size appeared in the dense forest behind the team. Its mountain-like body stretched across the top of the crowd, faintly giving off the feeling that it covered the sky and the sun. Two armored crocodiles. It's over. Why did two armored crocodiles suddenly appear? The moment the second armored crocodile appeared in front of everyone, the whole team gasped. Everyone's eyes were filled with dark clouds of despair. If there was only one armored crocodile, perhaps relying on Sun Xing and the team's strength, they might be able to repel it. However, with two armored crocodiles appearing at the same time, with the team's strength, the final outcome would undoubtedly be devastating. Sun Xing's complexion finally changed. Even Yi Kan and Wu Chen, who were not very worried, could not help but narrow their pupils into needles. A trace of anxiety rose in their hearts. Family head Sun, what should we do now? Yi Kan and Wu Chen came to Sun Xing's side and asked cautiously. In the whole team, the three of them were the strongest, so the others followed their lead. The important decisions were also made by the three of them. Sun Xing's eyes were gloomy as he said in a deep voice, "Young masters Yi Kan and Wu Chen, I will be responsible for the armored crocodile in front. The two of you will be responsible for the armored crocodile behind. Now, we must first let the team send Sun Jia away. Then we will work together to escape. This way, our team will not be wiped out." Hearing this, Yi Kan and Wu Chen frowned slightly. However, they also knew that Sun Jia played a pivotal role and position in the Sun family, so they did not say anything and just nodded in agreement. With the combined strength of the two of them, although they were not necessarily a match for the armored crocodile, they could still hold on for a period of time. The team must be transferred as soon as possible. Who should we hand this over to? Iken suddenly said. Hand it over to young Master Zhuan. Besides the two of you, young Master Zhuan is the strongest, Sun Xing said softly. Hearing this, the two of them nodded their heads. Zhuan could easily defeat initial golden venerable warriors. Obviously, his combat strength was comparable to an intermediate golden venerable realm warrior. So, the two of them felt quite relieved that Zhuan was responsible for the transfer of the team. Sun Xing stood Sun Xing, Yi Kan and Wu Chen. Yuan. Sun Xing stood at the front of the team, standing. Sun stood, standing. Sun stood, Sun stood, Sun stood, standing in front of the team. Zhuan. Sun Sunday. The two armored crocodiles will be held back by me, Yi Kan, and Wu Chen. All of you listen to young Master Zhuowen's arrangements. Quickly move the team and send Sun Jia to a safe place. Sun Xing shouted at the team behind him. A strong aura burst out from his body. He stomped his foot and charged towards the armored crocodile. His speed was at its peak. Yi Kan and Wu Chen also charged out. Their auras were at their peak as they charged towards the armored crocodile. The actions of Sun Xing, Yi Kan, and Wu Chen had obviously angered the armored crocodile. The armored crocodile let out a furious roar and stomped its front hooves on the ground. Then, its mountain-like body turned into a huge shadow and rushed towards Sun Xing. Sun Xing's eyes turned solemn. His hands swiftly formed a seal as terrifying yuan power gushed out. Soon after, it transformed into a gigantic yuan power net in front of him. Boom! The steel-armored crocodile arrived in an instant. Its huge bloody mouth was like a pair of scissors, opening and closing as it swept over, wanting to completely strangle Sun Xing to death. However, it was blocked by the large yuan power net in front of it. The large yuan power net was extremely tough. The body of the steel-armored crocodile that was charging towards Sun Xing was actually completely stopped. It stopped just 10 meters away from Sun Xing and was unable to advance any further. Sun Xing's face was slightly pale. This origin energy net had condensed most of the origin energy in Sun Xing's body. It could be said that he had exhausted all of his origin energy to execute this move. However, it could only barely block the armored crocodile. Yi Kan and Wu Chen, who were behind Sun Xing, each took out a sword and a saber respectively. They crossed their swords and saber, instantly releasing a terrifying blazing light. The saber and sword light intertwined in the air, forming a storm of saber and sword light. Boom boom boom. The armored crocodile was not to be trifled with. It stomped its front hooves and mercilessly slammed into the storm of saber and sword light. The powerful force caused the storm of saber and sword light to be pushed back. Yi Kan and Wu Chen, who were hit by the storm, spat out a mouthful of blood. Their faces were extremely pale. Block it? The two of them looked at each other. Shortly after, they roared and released an even more powerful origin energy. Immediately, the storm of saber and sword light, which was pushed back by the storm of saber and sword light, became much stronger. White light soared into the sky and forced the armored crocodile to retreat. Dun. Quickly take Sun Jia and leave. We can't hold on for long. The moment Sun Xing, Yi Kan and Wu Chen collided with the armored crocodile, the three of them roared and urged Zhuan to quickly take Sun Jia and leave this place. Zhuan nodded. Without hesitation, he said to Sun Jia, Miss Sun, the situation is critical now. Let's quickly leave this place. Don't let Master Sun, Yi Kan and Wu Chen's efforts go to waste. Sun Jia's face was deathly pale. This was the first time she had entered the true Vein Forest. She had never seen such a terrifying origin beast. Now that she saw it, she was extremely frightened. However, Zhuowen's shout woke her up. Sun Jia looked at Sun Xing, Yi Kan and Wu Chen, who were fighting with their lives on the line. Then she looked at Jun and said, "Why aren't you fighting with my father and the others against the armored crocodile? In this team, your strength should be second only to my father and the other two." Jun was startled. Soon after, he shook his head and said, "Master Sun has already instructed me to lead you guys to retreat first. At that time, the three of them will be able to escape. At present, this method is the safest." However, Sun Jia's beautiful face darkened. She said loudly, "Actually, you're just afraid of death, right? My father, Yi Kan and Wu Chen are fighting with their lives on the line against the armored crocodile. Instead, you're not saying anything. Are you still a man?" Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes darkened. He said indifferently, "Miss Sun, please pay attention to your words. I, Yun, am not a member of your Sun family. There should be no reason for me to risk my life to fight against the armored crocodile for you, right? Now that Master Sun has asked me to temporarily lead this team, I think it's best for you to cooperate. Now time is of the essence. Yun, why haven't you taken Sun Jia away?" At this moment, Sun Xing, who was supporting the Yuan power net in front, also noticed that Zhuowen, Sun Jia and the others had not left yet. He could not help but angrily shout out. The rest of the team was also extremely anxious. Sun Jia's willfulness made them angry and anxious. Now, it was a critical moment where lives were at stake. Why did Miss Sun suddenly throw a tantrum? "Brother Zhuowen, we don't want to waste time here. We'll leave first." Seeing that Sun Jia was actually willful and did not intend to leave, the rest of the team were not stupid. Naturally, they would not die with Sun Jia. So, they all said goodbye to Zhuowen and fled. "What a bunch of cowards," Sun Jia said coldly. Soon after, she indifferently stared at Zhuowen and said, "What about you? Why didn't a coward like you run away? I really didn't expect that you geniuses from big forces would be so cowardly and useless. Only the two brothers Yi Kan and Wu Chen are the most loyal." "Stupid. Your willfulness will completely kill your father, Yi Kan, and Wu Chen. Do you really think that the loyalty you speak of is useful? In my opinion, your choice is not a display of loyalty at all, but a display of pedantry and stupidity." Zhuowen indifferently glanced at Sun Jia and said indifferently. Looking at Zhuowen's expression, Sun Jia felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. She coldly snorted and said, "I know more about loyalty than you. Do I need a coward like you to teach me a lesson?" Zhuowen shook his head and was too lazy to pay attention to Sun Jia. This Sun Jia was young and inexperienced. She had not experienced the fickleness of the world. What she thought was very childish in Zhuowen's eyes. Therefore, Zhuowen did not want to pay attention to her. Instead, he looked at the armored crocodiles in front and behind. Bang! Suddenly, Yi Kan and Wu Chen, who were bitterly holding on at the back, finally spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out with a muffled groan. The sword storm was also completely destroyed by the armored crocodiles. Not long after Yi Kan and Wu Chen spat out blood and flew out, Sun Xing at the front let out a muffled groan. His feet stepped on the void and he retreated several hundred meters until he reached Zhuowen and Sun Jia. The moment Yi Kan and Wu Chen flew out, they were already protected by Zhuowen's Yuan Li and pulled to his side. "What's wrong with you two? Why aren't you running?" Looking at Zhuowen and Sun Jia who were still standing in the same place, Sun Xing could not help but shout angrily. The three of them worked hard to create an opportunity for the team to escape. Everyone else had escaped, but the most important one, Sun Jia, was still here. How could Sun Xing not be angry? It's Miss Sun Jia who doesn't want to leave. She thinks that those who run away are cowards. She doesn't want to be a coward, Zhuowen said indifferently. Hearing this, Sun Xing's gaze turned extremely gloomy. He said to Sun Jia in a deep voice, "Sun Jia, what's wrong with you? The three of us created such a good opportunity to escape. Why didn't you escape with us? Instead, you stayed behind to die?" In the face of Sun Xing's stern reprimand, Sun Jia's pretty face turned slightly pale. A trace of mist began to appear in her watery eyes. She also faintly realized that her actions earlier were indeed a little too willful. However, Sun Jia's personality was a little stubborn. The corner of her mouth twitched, and she pointed at Jun and said, "It's all because of this Yun. If he didn't act so cowardly at the beginning and didn't even dare to face the armored crocodiles, I wouldn't be so willful. Chapter 1036. Killing the Armored Crocodiles. If it's not your fault, then whose fault is it? If it weren't for your cowardly actions, I wouldn't have gotten angry, and I wouldn't have willfully refused to run away. It's all your fault. Sun Jia pointed at Zhuowen and said in a somewhat unreasonable manner. Zhuowen's gaze gradually turned cold, as if it was 10,000 years old ice. Sun Jia also felt the coldness in Zhuowen's eyes, and her whole body couldn't help but tremble. What kind of eyes could actually release such coldness? Sun Xing also felt the coldness in Zhuowen's body. He slightly frowned and said, "Let's not quarrel now, let's think of a way to deal with these armored crocodiles first. How are Yi Kan and Wu Chen, the two young masters?" At this moment, Yi Kan and Wu Chen's faces were as pale as snow. They quietly sat cross-legged in front of Zhuan. Both of them were short of breath, and there was blood at the corner of their mouths. Obviously, they had suffered serious internal injuries. Sun family head. Both of our injuries are too serious, and our combat power is less than 10%. It will be extremely difficult to deal with these armored crocodiles. Ikan said with a wry smile. Boom, boom. At this moment, the armored crocodiles in front and behind slowly walked over. Two pairs of bone-chilling eyes firmly stared at the 5 people in front of them. Their eyes contained a strong tyrannical and murderous intent. At this moment, Sun Jia finally felt afraid, especially when she saw the cruelty in the eyes of these 2 armored crocodiles. She couldn't help but tremble in fear, and in her heart, she began to regret being so willful and not running away. Dun. It's all because of you. Now we are surrounded by these 2 armored crocodiles, and we are going to die. It's all because of you. Sun Jia screamed in fear, and couldn't help but pointed at Zhuowen and shouted. Slap. The crisp sound of a slap rang out, and then Sun Jia's voice came to an abrupt halt. She covered her right cheek in a daze and stared at Zhuowen in disbelief. When she screamed just now, it was Zhuan who slapped her. Sun Jia didn't even think that this young man in front of her dared to slap her. Shut up. Clearly, it was your own willfulness that caused this big mistake, but instead, you pushed all these mistakes onto me. Don't you, the dignified Miss Sun, have any sense of shame? Zhuowen said indifferently. On the other hand, Sun Xing's face had already turned gloomy and unsightly. He said to Zhuowen in a deep voice, "Zhuowen, what do you mean by that? You actually hit my daughter in front of me. Are you provoking our Sun family? I think you're the one who should shut up. I only came to your Sun family to complete a mission. I'm not a servant of your Sun family. Of course, I'm not a scapegoat for your Sun family's young miss. Patriarch Sun, please know your priorities." With that, Zhuan took a step forward and walked towards the armored crocodile. At the same time, he took out the communication jade amulet and crushed it silently. The communication jade amulet turned into a beam of light, and a figure with a terrifying aura appeared above Zhuan. What a terrifying aura! Is this person a peak heavenly venerate powerhouse? Looking at the figure that suddenly appeared, Sun Xing's pupils shrank, and he couldn't help but shriek. The strongest person in their Sun family was Sun Xing, an early-stage heavenly venerate. In a small city like in Ming City, such a cultivation was already considered a pinnacle powerhouse. But now, a peak heavenly venerate powerhouse had suddenly appeared. Sun Xing was stunned at first, but then he revealed a look of ecstasy. He knew that they were saved. Although the armored crocodile was terrifying, it was only relative to early-stage and mid-stage heavenly venerate powerhouses. For a peak heavenly venerate powerhouse, it wasn't difficult. Master. As soon as the peak heavenly venerate powerhouse arrived, he came before Zhuowen and respectfully knelt down on one knee. The smile on Sun Xing's face instantly froze, and his eyes stared straight at the peak heavenly venerate powerhouse. This powerhouse, who made him tremble, actually knelt down on one knee in front of Zhuowen, whose cultivation was only at the sovereign realm. He even called Zhuowen his master. Was this a dream? Sun Xing wasn't the only one who was stunned. Sun Jia, as well as the seriously injured Yi Kan and Wu Chen, who were sitting cross-legged on the ground, were also stunned. A peak heavenly venerate powerhouse actually called Zhuan his master? Sun Jia's mouth was wide open, and he said this sentence in disbelief. Although Zhang Tianzuan had followed Zhuan into the Sun family's martial arts practice field, Zhang Tianzuan's aura was restrained at that time, and he was standing behind Zhuan submissively. Therefore, he didn't attract anyone's attention. Now, Zhang Tianzuan was showing off his abilities, and he truly shocked Sun Xing and the others. I'll leave the armored crocodile at the back to you. As for the armored crocodile at the front, leave it to me. Zhuan pointed at the armored crocodile at the back and said to Zhang Tianzuan indifferently. Zhang Tianzuan nodded and didn't disobey Zhuan. He took a step forward and rushed towards the armored crocodile at the back. As for Zhuan dealing with the armored crocodile alone, Zhang Tianzuan wasn't too worried because he knew how powerful Zhuan was. After all, Zhuan was an existence that killed 5 heavenly venerates. How could he be afraid of a mere armored crocodile? Hearing Zhuan's words, Sun Xing and the others were stunned. They could naturally understand why Zhuan ordered Zhang Tianzuan to deal with the armored crocodile at the back. However, this Zhuan was actually preparing to deal with the armored crocodile at the front alone. What was the meaning of this? Could it be that Zhuan, a mere sovereign realm warrior, actually wanted to challenge the armored crocodile that even Sun Xing was no match for? Young Master Zhuan, did you make a mistake? This armored crocodile is very difficult to deal with. Even an early-stage heavenly venerate warrior would find it difficult to deal with it. Do you really plan to face it alone? Do you need my help? Sun Xing suddenly asked. No need, I can still deal with a mere armored crocodile. Zhuan shook his head and said indifferently. As soon as these words came out, Sun Xing and the others' faces twitched. The armored crocodile that they couldn't deal with was just a mere armored crocodile in Zhuan's mouth? This Zhuan is too arrogant. Iken shook his head and said helplessly. Humph. You didn't take action before, and now you're trying to puff yourself up at your own cost. You actually dare to face the armored crocodile alone. You're simply seeking your own death. Sun Jia curled her lips and said with disdain toward Zhuan. Of course, Zhuan directly ignored Sun Jia. This woman was not only naive, but also unruly and stubborn. She refused to admit her mistakes and even tried to shirk responsibility. Zhuan really didn't want to pay attention to this kind of woman. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, Zhang Tianzuan collided with the armored crocodile behind him. However, Zhang Tianzuan was an expert at the peak of the Heavenly Master realm, so the armored crocodile was at a disadvantage from the beginning and was miserably suppressed. The armored crocodile in front glanced at Zhang Tianzuan's figure with fear, and then its tyrannical gaze fell on Zhuan. It could clearly feel the aura of this human in front of it. With such a weak cultivation, he actually dared to block in front of it. Was he insulting it? Or? The armored crocodile roared and instantly rushed toward Zhuan. Its bloody mouth was wrapped with the power of 1,000 caddies. In an instant, it arrived in front of Zhuan. Its upper and lower jaws opened and closed, wanting to crush Zhuan directly. Zhuan sneered and changed his hand seal. A sorrowful aura gushed out from his body and gradually filled his whole body. Then, it formed a mysterious and strange seal behind Zhuan. It was the morning treasure seal that Zhuan had just learned. An intense sorrowful aura filled the air and immediately mobilized the sorrowful emotions in Sun Xing and the other 4 people. Then they fell into a sorrowful situation. Their bodies were weak and their strength was declining rapidly. The ferocious gaze of the armored crocodile was suddenly replaced by sorrow. Then, the ferocious aura on its body weakened a lot and its huge head drooped down. Nirvana of the Great Sun, Zhuan shouted loudly. His entire body flickered with golden light, and 4 heads and 8 arms extended from his body. Then, Zhuan's hand seals changed, and the golden light burst out to the extreme. His body grew 10 feet tall, and turned into 100 feet tall. His entire body was even bigger than the armored crocodile. Break for me! Zhuan took a step forward, and arrived in front of the armored crocodile that was being suppressed by the morning treasure seal. His 8 arms suddenly dropped down, and 8 terrifying forces gathered together, and actually filled the surroundings with a ring-shaped airwave, and spread out. Boom, The armored crocodile was suppressed too badly by the morning treasure seal. Not only its strength, but its defense was also weakened by 20 to 30%. Zhuowen's terrifying strength hammered down on the armored crocodile. The armored crocodile wailed and fell to the ground without any resistance, creating a huge pit that was dozens of feet wide. Looking at this scene, Sun Xing, Sun Jia, and the other three people's faces froze. When did this armored crocodile become so weak? It was actually hammered down by Zhuowen with just one move. It should be known that whether it was the joint forces of Yi Kan and Wu Qin, or the early-stage Heavenly Master Sun Xing, none of them were a match for the armored crocodile. However, in front of Zhuowen, who was in the sovereign realm, this armored crocodile was actually so weak. Of course, they knew the reason for this. It could only mean that Zhuowen's strength was not inferior to a Heavenly Master. Moreover, it was far beyond the early stage of the Heavenly Master realm. A sovereign realm warrior with the battle strength of a Heavenly Master realm warrior was definitely an extremely terrifying talent. This warrior was definitely a monstrous genius. Boom, boom. Zhuowen, who was hundreds of meters tall, descended from the sky. One of his arms grabbed the armored crocodile in the crater, while the other 7 arms formed into fists. He continuously threw punches at the armored crocodile without any regard for his own life. Every punch landed on the armored crocodile's flesh, causing golden light to explode. Ooh. Even though the armored crocodile's defense was astonishing, under the devastation of these terrifying fists, it was bleeding from its 7 orifices. It was on the verge of death, and its eyelids drooped. It was actually in a half-dead state. Zhuowen threw the armored crocodile to the ground. Then, his pillar-like foot suddenly stomped on the armored crocodile's head. With a poochie sound, the armored crocodile's head exploded. It was actually completely dead. Gulp. Looking at such a bloody scene, Sun Xing, Sun Jia, Yi Kan, and Wu Qin involuntarily swallowed their saliva. When they looked behind them, they discovered that Xiang Tianzuan's battle was also coming to an end. The armored crocodile at the back was finally annihilated by Xiang's attack. Chapter 1037. Son-in-law selection. After the armored crocodile was killed, the golden light on Zhuowen's body gradually receded. His 4 heads and 8 arms also returned to normal, and his 100-feet body returned to the size of a normal person. Xiang Tianzuan appeared behind Zhuowen and stood respectfully. His eyes were filled with amazement. It seemed that his master was getting stronger and stronger, and he was becoming more and more unfathomable. Have you dealt with it? Zhuowen asked indifferently. Master, the armored crocodile behind us has been dealt with, Xiang Tianzuan said respectfully. Sun Xing and the other 3 were still in a daze. Among them, Sun Jia was the most surprised. Sun Jia's beautiful eyes looked at the armored crocodile that was bleeding from its 7 orifices. She then looked at the tall and straight figure standing in front of the armored crocodile, and the corner of her mouth suddenly revealed a self-mocking smile. She also did not expect that Zhuowen's strength would be so terrifying that even the armored crocodile was easily killed by him. What was laughable was that she had previously mocked Zhuowen and called him a useless coward, and even pushed all the responsibility to Zhuowen. Now that she thought about it, she suddenly felt how ridiculous she was at that time. Perhaps at that time, Zhuowen did not even spare a glance for the armored crocodile, and she mocked Zhuowen for being a coward. But now, the scene in front of her gave her a hard slap, waking her up. At the same time, Sun Jia's beautiful eyes turned towards the pale-faced Yi Kan and Wu Qin. She suddenly felt that compared to Zhuowen, the 2 of them were not even worth mentioning. The good impression she had of the 2 of them gradually faded. After Sun Xing and the other 3 recovered from their shock, Sun Xing led Sun Jia and the other 2 to stand behind Zhuowen and said carefully, "Young Master Zhua, is this senior really your servant?" Boom. A terrifying aura suddenly burst out from Xiang's body. Xiang stared coldly at Sun Xing and said indifferently, "What? Are you questioning Master?" Feeling Xiang's terrifying aura, Sun Xing's entire body trembled. Sun Jia and the other 2 were even more unbearable. They almost knelt on the ground, their footsteps unsteady. "Senior, we don't mean to question young Master Zhua. We're just curious." Sun Xing quickly said with a smile. Xiang was a peak Empyrean powerhouse. He could kill an early-stage Empyrean like him with a single palm strike. He didn't dare to offend him. Young Master Zhua, I didn't expect you to be so strong. To be able to kill an armored crocodile as a supreme being, it seems like you must be an extraordinary genius in the Divine Institute, right? Xiang Tianzuan was stubborn. Sun Xing's gaze landed on Zhuan. Master has only been in the Divine Institute for a month, but he is the #1 new student. In the future, he will definitely soar in the outer court. Entering the outer court's Empyrean ranking, and even entering the inner court will be a cinch. As he spoke, Xiang's eyes were filled with pride. He was well aware of how strong Zhuowen's talent was. Moreover, he also knew that Zhuowen had the mysterious Xiaohei dog. Zhuowen's future path was absolutely limitless. Xiang, who was originally very unwilling to become Zhuowen's servant, was now completely convinced. He was even proud of it. #1 new student. Hearing Xiang's words, Sun Xing and the other three looked at each other in dismay. They could see the surprise in each other's eyes. They were well aware of the weight of the #1 new student. Generally speaking, if a student who was able to obtain the #1 new student in the outer court didn't fall midway or abandon themselves, their future achievements would definitely be terrifying. Zhuan was actually this year's #1 new student. It was no wonder that his battle strength was so terrifying. Moreover, he had a peak Empyrean as his servant. It was obvious that his background wasn't low. At this moment, the four people's view of Zhuan had completely changed. They were no longer as indifferent as before. Instead, they became cautious and cautious. After all, whether it was the strength that Zhuowen had displayed or the background of the Divine Institute behind him, he was far superior to any one of them. They had no choice but to be careful. Zhuowen's gaze was indifferent as he said, "Patriarch's son, since the armored crocodile has been dealt with, shouldn't we return? As for the channel opening pill that Patriarch's son promised, I hope that Patriarch's son won't disappoint me." Hearing this, Sun Xing's gaze froze. He hurriedly smiled and said, "Of course. I naturally won't forget about the channel opening pill. Young Master Zhuo is right. Let's return first." As he spoke, Sun Xing led the four of them back the way they came. It was peaceful along the way. Although some meta-beasts would fly out and attack them, these meta-beasts were relatively weak. Moreover, the group had Xiang Tianzuan and Zhuan. Naturally, there wasn't any danger. It was worth mentioning that along the way, Sun Jia's attitude towards Yi Kan and Wu Chen was no longer as harmonious as before. Instead, it had become icy cold. At the same time, Sun Jia also faintly expressed her closeness to Zhuan. She even took the initiative to chat with Zhuan. Zhuan sneered in his heart at Sun Jia's behavior. However, he didn't show it on his face. He was even extremely cold, causing Sun Jia to meet with a cold shoulder. After about 2 hours, the group successfully walked out of the True Vein Forest periphery and returned to Yinming City. In the Sun family's guest hall, Sun Xing sat on the main seat. Below him sat Zhuowen, Yi Kan and Wu Chen. As for the other warriors, because they had escaped halfway, Sun Xing didn't plan to find them. Sun Jia silently stood beside Sun Xing. Her pair of watery eyes stared at Tun, who was sitting motionless like a mountain. Unfortunately, Yuan didn't look at Sun Jia at all. His gaze was cold and calm. Looking at Zhuowen's appearance, Sun Jia's beautiful eyes revealed a trace of disappointment and resentment. Many thanks to the help of the three young masters this time, our Sun family was able to pick the herbs we needed. Once again, this Sun thanks you in advance. Sun Xing cupped his hands towards the three people below him and said with a hearty smile. Zhuowen and the other two also cupped their hands in response. The few of them first exchanged greetings. Then, Sun Xing clapped his hands. Suddenly, 3 gray-clothed servants walked out from the hall. These 3 servants were holding palm-sized brocade boxes in their hands. Looking at this scene, Zhuowen, Wu Chen and Yi Kan's eyes flashed. They knew that the brocade boxes in the hands of these 3 servants were their goal this time. I believe that the 3 of you have already guessed the contents of these brocade boxes? That's right. These are the channel opening pills that I have prepared for the 3 of you. As Sun Xing spoke, he gestured to the 3 servants. Then, the 3 servants respectfully handed the brocade boxes in their hands to Zhuan and the other 2. The 3 of you can check and see if there are any flaws in them. Seeing that the brocade boxes were handed over to the 3 of them, Sun Xing smiled and said, "Do we not trust Patriarch Sun?" Ikan laughed. His hands were not slow as he directly opened the brocade boxes. Instantly, a strong medicinal smell wafted out. A thumb-sized pill was quietly lying in the brocade boxes. Wu Chen and Zhua Wen also silently opened their respective brocade boxes. They looked at the pills in their brocade boxes and saw that the pills were emerald green in color. Within the emerald green, there were traces of white lines. They were sparkling and translucent. The 3 of them nodded as their eyes revealed a satisfied expression. Whether it was the appearance or color of this channel-opening pill, it was the same as the description of the channel-opening pill. It should not be fake. Moreover, the forces behind the 3 of them were not weak. Sun Xing would not take out a fake channel-opening pill to deceive them. Otherwise, the forces behind the 3 of them would not let the Sun family off. It is indeed the channel-opening pill. Thank you for your gift, Patriarch Sun. Wu Chen excitedly kept the brocade boxes into his spirit ring and cupped his hands towards Sun Xing. Sun Xing nodded and exchanged some pleasantries with the 3 of them in the hall. Soon after, Ikan and Wu Chen stood up and left. When Zhuan was about to leave, he was stopped by Sun Xing. "Patriarch Sun, what's the matter?" Zhuan looked at Sun Xing with a faint smile. Sun Xing coughed and a warm smile appeared on his face as he said, "Young Master Zhua, there is something else in your brocade boxes. There are actually 4 channel-opening pills hidden in the brocade boxes. Take it as my repayment for your life-saving grace." Hearing this, Zhuan's eyebrows twitched. He did not expect Sun Xing to actually hide 4 channel-opening pills in the brocade boxes. Moreover, looking at him, he should be the only one who received such treatment. Wu Chen and Yi Kan's brocade boxes should only have 1 channel-opening pill. It seems that Patriarch Sun is also a person who knows how to repay kindness. Thank you for your gift. If there is nothing else, I plan to leave this place. Zhuan nodded and cupped his hands. He planned to get up and leave the Sun family. Now that the matter of the channel-opening pill was settled, Zhuan planned to once again enter the basin of the true vein forest. After all, there was a small yuan vein hidden there. "Young Master Zhua, please wait." Sun Xing called out to Zhuan again, causing the latter to frown. Sun Xing was a little strange today, but he did not know why. "Patriarch Sun, is there anything else?" Zhuan said indifferently. Sun Xing's eyes flickered and he laughed dryly. "Young Master Zhua, this year, my daughter is 18 years old and can be considered an adult. However, because of her identity as an alchemist, she is coveted by many people. Therefore, I plan to entrust my daughter to young Master Zhua. What do you think?" When these words came out, Sun Jia, who was standing behind him, blushed. However, she did not object. Her eyes stared straight at Zhuan as her heart was filled with hope and excitement. Sun Xing also looked at Zhuan expectantly. He was well aware of how powerful the young man in front of him was. He had the combat strength of an early-stage heavenly venerable at the sovereign realm. His talent was unquestionable, and his future achievements were limitless. If they could recruit him into the Sun family, it would undoubtedly be very beneficial to their Sun family. Chapter 1038. Yuan Vein. Sun Xing was quite confident that Zhuan would agree. After all, Sun Jia's beauty was outstanding and she had the status of an alchemist. Not many cultivators would be able to reject such an offer. Zhuan was taken aback as he stared at Sun Xing in astonishment. He did not expect Sun Xing to entrust Sun Jia to him. Was he trying to make him his son-in-law? "Young Master Zhua, what do you think?" Sun Xing asked again. Zhuan glanced at Sun Jia indifferently and shook his head. "Thank you for your kind intentions, but I have not started my own marriage yet. Therefore, I cannot agree to this." As he spoke, Zhuan cupped his hands and left the hall without looking back. Sun Xing and Sun Jia were petrified as they stood on the spot and watched Zhuan's back as he left. After leaving the Sun family, Zhuan summoned Zhang Tianzuan. However, Yuan did not immediately head to the True Meridian Forest. Instead, he found an inn in Anming City, booked a private room and stayed there. Since he had already obtained the channel opening pill, he naturally wanted to test its effects. If it could really expand his meridians, Zhuowen's strength would definitely rise to another level. In the dark room, Zhuowen sat quietly on the bed. With a flip of his right hand, he retrieved the brocade box that Sun Xing had given him. After taking out one of the channel opening pills, Zhuowen rummaged through the box and found the other 4 channel opening pills at the bottom. The channel opening pills effects are the best the first time. The second time, the effects are barely satisfactory. I will give the remaining 4 channel opening pills to Jianan and the rest when I return to the academy. Zhuowen muttered to himself as he kept the brocade box and silently stared at the emerald green pill in his palm. I hope that this channel opening pill will not disappoint me. As he spoke, Zhuowen threw the channel opening pill into his mouth and swallowed it. Zhuowen slowly closed his eyes and began to silently refine the powerful effects of the channel opening pill. Boom! Not long after, a muffled thunder-like sound came from Zhuowen's body, as if all the bones in his body had been dislocated. Following that, Zhuowen could clearly feel the powerful medicinal effects of the channel opening pill spreading throughout his meridians. This medicinal power was very magical. Every time it passed through a meridian, the surging medicinal power would continuously strengthen Zhuowen's meridians, causing Zhuowen's entire body to feel warm and comfortable. The effect is not bad. I wonder how long the effects of this channel opening pill will last? A glint flashed across Zhuowen's eyes as he muttered softly. Soon after, he once again sat down cross-legged and began to silently refine the medicinal strength that was flowing through the meridians in his entire body. Time passed slowly, and 3 days passed in a flash. During these 3 days, Zhuowen had been sitting in his room, silently refining the medicinal effects of the channel opening pill. Finally, when the dawn of the 4th day peeked out from the clouds, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. The aura in his body had also strengthened by a lot. Evidently, this was all due to the effects of the channel opening pill. My meridians have strengthened by a few notches. This way, the yuan energy absorption rate will be much faster than before. Zhuowen softly muttered. At this speed, I'm afraid that you won't be far from breaking through to the golden exalted level. This Dragon Lord estimates that in another 1 or 2 months, you should be able to successfully break through to the golden exalted level. Xiao Hei's voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen nodded and said, Indeed. Now, I should make another trip to the True Vein Forest. Perhaps I can borrow the yuan veins in the basin of the True Vein Forest and shorten the time needed to break through by several times. As he spoke, Zhuowen pushed open the door and walked out of the inn. He brought Zhang Tianzuan out of Anming City and rushed towards the True Vein Forest. With the previous experience, Zhuowen seemed to be more familiar with the journey. However, Zhuowen keenly discovered that there were more meta beasts in the True Vein Forest today than 3 days ago. Moreover, they were even more violent. Some of the weaker meta beasts actually charged toward Zhuowen without any regard for their lives. Fortunately, Zhuowen's strength was not weak. With the help of Zhang Tianzuan, Zhuowen's speed was not slow. After about 2 hours, they arrived at the basin from the previous time. At this moment, the yuan energy in the basin was actually much richer than before. Moreover, the yuan energy was gushing towards the sky, forming an extremely spectacular yuan energy pillar. It looked extremely magnificent. The yuan energy in the basin is much richer than before. Looking at this scene, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he said in a somewhat strange voice, I'm afraid that the yuan vein below the basin is about to appear. Kid, even if you don't dig, the yuan vein will appear by itself. Xiao Hei said in a serious tone. Zhuowen nodded. Soon after, he took a step forward and arrived at the area in the basin that he had marked previously. He saw that the yuan qi in this area was the densest. As the yuan qi rose, many of them condensed into liquid in the air. From this, one could see how dense the yuan qi was. Then let's put in more effort. Zhuowen muttered in a low voice as he looked at the area beneath his feet, and then his right hand formed into the shape of a claw before abruptly grabbing towards this area. Terrifying origin energy poured out and instantly blasted open a hole that was almost 3 m in size in this area. Boom! Instantly, surging yuan energy burst out from the hole and formed a terrifying yuan energy pillar. It was indomitable and stretched across the sky above the basin. Rumble! The moment the yuan energy pillar was formed, the entire basin began to shake violently. Not only that, but even the other areas outside the basin began to rumble as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. Perhaps it was a chain reaction, but the entire true vein forest shook violently. A ring-shaped energy spread out with the basin as the center. Then, the countless snake-scale trees that stood in the true vein forest began to collapse. Moreover, the shaking became more and more intense. Even Enming City, which was in front of the true vein forest, was greatly affected. What's going on? What a strong vibration. This vibration seems to be coming from the depths of the true vein forest. In Anming City, countless warriors raised their heads and looked in the direction of the true pulse forest. There, the terrifying Yuan Qi formed a Yuan Qi pillar that pierced the heavens and the earth. It was a spectacular sight to behold. What a dense Yuan Qi! Could it be that the heavenly pillar was condensed from Yuan Qi? How rich does it need to be to form such a terrifying Yuan energy pillar? All the warriors in Enming City muttered to themselves. Their eyes were filled with shock. The Yuan energy pillar that stretched across the sky was too powerful. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The moment the Yuan energy pillar was formed, several powerful figures rushed out of Enming City. These figures had powerful auras and should be experts hiding in Enming City. The direction these figures were rushing towards was the Yuan energy pillar in the depths of the true vein forest. To be able to cause the true vein forest to shake so violently and form such a terrifying Yuan energy pillar, there must be a unique treasure in the depths of the true vein forest. Rumble! At this moment, the entire basin had changed greatly. The basin, which was originally several miles wide, had actually split into a huge fissure that was dozens of feet long. The fissure was pitch black, as if it led to the abyss of hell. It was so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. The moment the crack appeared, the Yuan energy in the entire basin was extremely rich. It formed a Yuan energy hurricane in the sky. It was a spectacular sight. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At the same time, pieces of spirit stones spewed out along with the terrifying Yuan energy from the crack. It was like a fairy scattering flowers as it shot into the sky. It's spirit stones. Collect them. Looking at the spirit stones that shot out from the crack, Zhuowen's eyes flashed. With a wave of his right hand, Yuan energy gushed out and turned into a huge Yuan energy palm. It swept through the air and plundered a considerable amount of spirit stones. Soon after, he unceremoniously stored them in his spirit ring. However, there were too many spirit stones. Most of them were low-grade spirit stones. At the same time, there were also mid-grade spirit stones. In such a large base, there were also many high-grade spirit stones. Zhuan did not lack low-grade and mid-grade spirit stones. However, he did not have many high-grade spirit stones on him. The capacity of the spirit ring is limited. I don't want low-grade and mid-grade spirit stones. I'll collect high-grade spirit stones directly. After making up his mind, Zhuan leaped up. Like a rock spreading its wings, he constantly flashed above the Yuan energy pillar. At the same time, both of his hands condensed a huge Yuan energy palm and continuously collected the spirit stones that were spewing out into the spirit ring. Of course, Zhuan specifically picked high-grade spirit stones and ignored low-grade and mid-grade spirit stones. Zhuan sucked again. Suddenly, among the numerous spirit stones, he found a few spirit stones that were as dazzling as gemstones. Not only the light on the surface of these spirit stones, but also the Yuan energy contained in them were far superior to high-grade spirit stones. This is a supreme-grade spirit stone? Looking at the extremely dazzling spirit stone in his hand, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He could not help but exclaim out loud. His face revealed an ecstatic expression. He did not expect there to be a supreme-grade spirit stone in here. It should be known that supreme-grade spirit stones were extremely valuable and rare. It was basically impossible to find such spirit stones circulating in the market. Moreover, it was said that a supreme-grade spirit stone was equivalent to 1,000 high-grade spirit stones. Moreover, it was priceless. A supreme-grade spirit stone was also a huge fortune. The real good stuff should be in the depths of the crack. It seems that this Dragon Lord's estimation was wrong. This underground yuan energy vein is not a small one at all. With such a dense yuan energy, I'm afraid it's at least a large one. If the formation of a small yuan energy vein is accidental, then the formation of a large yuan energy vein is definitely not accidental. There must be some kind of treasure that caused the formation of the yuan energy vein. Kid, go into the crack and have a look. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly sounded. He actually instigated Zhuowen to go into the depths of the crack. Are you sure there's something good in this crack? Zhuowen asked suspiciously. I'm sure. Just go in. With your cultivation and the help of Zhang Tianzuan, there's nothing to be afraid of. Xiao Hei smiled faintly. Chapter 1039. Deep in the crevice was extremely dark. Astral winds swept through and yuan qi spewed out like a giant whale spewing water. Under the force of the spewing, Yun and Zhang Tianzuan descended at a rather slow speed. This crevice is not very deep. You should reach the bottom after diving a few hundred meters. To be able to nurture such a dense yuan vein, there must be something good at the bottom. Swoosh! Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. Zhuowen's gaze turned cold as he extended his right hand and pinched a palm-sized black shadow. What is this? What Zhuowen clamped down on was a large black bug. Its outer shell was covered with many small bumps, and it looked extremely disgusting. Moreover, the front of this large bug actually had a row of fangs that flickered with cold light. It was extremely strange. This is a corroding beetle, a yuan beast that likes to live in dark environments. Furthermore, this kind of insect-type yuan beast usually likes to live in groups, so be careful, kid, Xiao Hei said solemnly. A group of yuan beasts? I think I've already seen it. As he spoke, Yun keenly discovered that there were actually many palm-sized black shadows flying around the cliff. These black shadows were actually the corroding beetles that Tun had pinched in his hand. Ziying, get ready. Don't let these corroding beetles come close. Zhuowen instructed Zhang Tianzuan beside him. Shortly after, he pinched 2 fingers on his right hand. Immediately, the fat corroding beetle was crushed, and countless green juices burst out. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The moment Zhuowen crushed the corroding beetle, the other corroding beetles in the surroundings went crazy. All of them flapped their thin wings and rushed toward Zhuowen and Zhang Tianzuan, wanting to eat Zhuowen. Divine Sun Cauldron. Come out. Zhuowen bellowed. A huge furnace rose behind him. Wisps of terrifying sun fire gushed out of the furnace and surrounded Zhuowen, protecting him. As for Empyrean Ziyang, he pushed out with both hands and 3 purple suns surged out from his body. These 3 purple suns revolved around his body and began to revolve continuously. Purple flames spread out, and the moment the beetles entered the range of the purple suns, they were all roasted into charcoal. The situation on Zhuowen's side was the same. The temperature of the sun's fire was no less than that of Ziyang. Although there were many beetles around, they couldn't do anything to Zhuowen. Instead, they were all burned into ashes. The 2 people who were surrounded by flames slowly sank down and finally landed at the bottom. At the bottom of the crack was a piece of barren land, where not even a blade of grass grew. Xiao Hei, where is the source of primordial qi? Zhuowen suddenly asked. In front. Xiao Hei said concisely. Nodding, Yun took a step forward and rushed forward. In an instant he arrived at the place Xiao Hei had mentioned. It was a huge natural cave, and Yun stood at the entrance of the cave. Waves of primordial qi gushed out of the cave like water columns from water guns. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. The primordial qi in this place was denser than in other places. He didn't know what was in this cave. Let's go in and take a look. After saying that, Yun led Zhang Tianzuan into the cave. As soon as they entered, Yun was surprised to find that the walls around the cave were inlaid with spirit stones. Moreover, they were all supreme-grade spirit stones. Master! These are supreme-grade spirit stones? Zi Yang's eyes immediately revealed a blazing color. However, he didn't lose his rationality. Instead, he asked Zhuan, "Take them. Take them all. There are so many supreme-grade spirit stones here. You don't have to ask for my permission," Zhuan said calmly. Zhang Tianzuan was ecstatic. He nodded heavily and rushed toward the supreme-grade spirit stones around the walls. With a wave of his right hand, he removed all the supreme-grade spirit stones that were inlaid in the walls. Zhuan was not to be outdone. He also moved toward the other side of the cave. Soon, the two of them had removed all the supreme-grade spirit stones. Zhuowen had obtained nearly 200 top-grade spirit stones, while Emperor Ziyang had obtained 180 top-grade spirit stones. This could be said to be a huge fortune. A single top-grade spirit stone was enough to make many cultivators fight over it until their heads bled. Now, Zhuowen and Ziyang had obtained several hundred top-grade spirit stones. If their wealth was exposed, it would definitely attract the attention of many warriors. "Let's go. Let's go deeper. There should be other things inside," Zhuan said and led Zhang Tianzuan into the depths of the cave. They had obtained so many supreme-grade spirit stones as soon as they stepped into the cave. They knew that there must be better things in the depths of the cave. In front of them was a very deep corridor. After quietly walking through this dark corridor, the two of them walked to a corner. Following this corner, the two of them quickly discovered that there was another corridor behind this corner. Strangely, the surface of the tunnel was blood red, as if there was an extremely strong bloody light at the end of the tunnel, dyeing the tunnel red. The moment the two of them stepped into the tunnel, Zhuowen's sharp senses discovered that the blood in his body seemed to surge rapidly, as if his blood was boiling. "What's going on? The bloody light in the tunnel is so strange," Zhuowen murmured, squinting his eyes. The bloody light could affect the blood in his body, which made Zhuowen frown. He didn't know whether the effect was good or bad. "Let's go deeper and have a look." With that, Zhuowen and Emperor Ziyang continued onwards. However, when they reached the length of the passageway, their eyes immediately turned blood red. The bloodlust in their hearts was stirred up by the blood-red light. This bloody light contains a trace of slaughter concept, and it's beginning to arouse the murderous desire in my body? Zhuowen finally noticed that something was amiss. As he went deeper into the passageway, he noticed that the bloody light actually contained a strand of slaughter concept. It was simply terrifying to the extreme, and it was even more overbearing than his devil Tao of slaughter. The sound of something breaking through the air suddenly rang out beside Zhuowen. Zhuowen's pupils shrank and he took a few steps back. Then, a palm heavily slammed into the spot where Zhuowen had been standing just a moment ago. Boom! A terrifying Yuanli gushed out and blasted a deep hole in the ground. The figure who wanted to sneak attack Zhuowen was none other than Zhang Tianzuan. It seems that Zhang has been deeply affected by the murderous desire. Looking at Zhang Tianzuan, who had red eyes and a ferocious face, Zhuowen knew that Zhang Tianzuan had been completely dominated by the murderous desire. "Unfortunately, your soul imprint is still in my knowledge sea. You can't hurt me," Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. He summoned Zhang Tianzuan's soul imprint in his knowledge sea. His mental strength turned into a needle, and he stabbed the soul imprint. "Ah!" Zhang Tianzuan clutched his head and screamed. The soul imprint was closely related to his soul. When the soul imprint was damaged, his body would naturally be affected. The moment Zhang Tianzuan clutched his head and screamed, Zhuowen took a step and suddenly appeared behind Zhang Tianzuan. Yuanli gushed out and turned into a huge palm. He pinched Zhang Tianzuan and threw him toward the entrance of the tunnel. Thump, thump. When Zhang Tianzuan landed at the entrance of the tunnel, the blood-red color in his eyes gradually faded, and he regained his clarity. He also remembered that he had fallen into the murderous desire just now. If Zhuowen had not sent him out of the tunnel in advance, the consequences would have been unimaginable. "Thank you, Master, for saving my life." Zhang Tianzuan quickly cupped his hands and said to Zhuowen. Zhuowen waved his hand and said, "No need to thank me. Wait for me at the entrance. I'll go in and take a look." Hearing this, Zhang Tianzuan hesitated and said, "Master, this tunnel is so strange. I'm afraid that there should be an ominous place at the end of this tunnel. Do you really plan to go deeper? Don't worry. You just wait for me outside. Zhuan waved his hand and immediately continued to go deeper into the tunnel. Zhuan had mastered the demonic path of massacre. Although the murderous intent in this tunnel was very strong, Zhuan would not lose himself in it. After all, he had already mastered the power of the second stage of bedevilment. This murderous intent was really not enough to make him fall. As he went deeper into the tunnel, Zhuan also found that the murderous intent inside was getting more and more powerful and terrifying. Even Zhuan's eyes became incomparably red, and the murderous desire in his heart became more and more intense. First stage of bedevilment. Zhuan shouted in a low voice and used the power of bedevilment. Suddenly, the murderous demonic qi surrounded Zhuan's body, and Zhuan also turned into a blood-red-haired and blood-red-eyed state. Since the murderous intent in this tunnel was so strong, Zhuan simply used the power of bedevilment to fight demons with demons. Zhuan, who had fallen into the state of bedevilment, was a lot more clear-headed. The essence of his demonic path of massacre was the same as the murderous intent, so after using the power of bedevilment, the murderous desire in Zhuan's heart was completely extinguished, replaced by coldness and calmness. The core of demons was to ignore the world. From beginning to end, they were as calm as water, as indifferent as a demon. This was the true meaning of demons. Of course, demons also represented cruelty and overbearingness. It was precisely because of their indifferent attitude that demons could do all kinds of cruel things that ordinary people could not imagine. Because cruel things, in the eyes of demons, were just normal things like playing house. Because of this, demon cultivators from ancient times to the present were generally not understood by people. Of course, although demon cultivators were cruel and overbearing, they had not reached the point where everyone wanted to kill them. After all, the world of martial arts was originally cruel. Demon cultivators were just more suitable to survive in this world compared to other warriors. Of course, they were also more powerful. Dang dang dang. The sound of slow footsteps resounded in the tunnel. Zhuan's eyes were indifferent as he walked. After about half an hour, Zhuan finally reached the end of the tunnel and arrived at the core of this cave. Chapter 1040. Monk in blood-red clothes, that is? A figure sitting cross-legged in the middle of the cave caught Zhuan's attention. This person was around 40 years old and wore blood-red clothes. His entire body was suffused with a strange blood-red aura, and waves of extremely terrifying slaughter concept suffused the air. Moreover, what was even more worthy of Zhuan's attention was that this person was bald and actually dressed like a monk. A monk who believed in Buddhism had such a terrifying aura of slaughter emanating from his body. All of this was extremely strange. Monks were supposed to abstain from meat and recite scriptures to save the world. They were supposed to be compassionate and compassionate. They were supposed to stop killing and create a harmonious world. However, the blood-clothed monk in front of him gave Zhuan a huge shock. The murderous aura on his body was too strong. He had to have killed countless creatures to have such a terrifying murderous aura. This murderous aura was not any weaker than the blood demon in the demon-suppressing green coffin. It was even more terrifying than the one in the demon-suppressing green coffin. At the same time, Zhuan also noticed that there was a blood-red Buddhist commandment blade in front of the monk in blood-red clothes. The blade of the Buddhist commandment blade was stained with dried blood. It looked extremely strange. The Buddhist commandment blade was a blade worn by monks. It was only allowed to cut clothes and not kill. However, the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade in front of him was stained with blood. It was unknown how many creatures it had killed. Is this person? Looking at the blade and the monk in front of him, Zhuan frowned slightly. He could not figure out the identity of the monk in the middle of the cave. He's a dead man. Xiao Hei suddenly appeared on Zhuan's shoulder. She stared at the monk in blood-red clothes with her black eyes and said indifferently, "A dead man?" Zhuan was startled. Soon after, he stepped into the cave. However, the instant he stepped into the cave, a muffled thunder-like explosion suddenly resounded in Zhuan's mind. Soon after, a terrifying murderous aura rushed toward Zhuo Wen's body like rivers flowing into the sea. What a terrifying murderous aura! Why is this murderous aura rushing towards my body? Zhuo Wen let out a muffled groan and involuntarily took a few steps back. His eyes were filled with shock. The terrifying murderous aura was too great. If it all entered Zhuo Wen's body, one would not be able to withstand it. Buddha's eyes. Taking a few steps back, Zhuo Wen hastily summoned the Buddha's eye that shone with golden light. Immediately, a solemn ancient Buddha's shadow sat in the void behind Zhuo Wen. A Sanskrit sound rang out, immediately blocking the surging slaughter chi. With the protection of the ancient Buddha shadow, Zhuo Wen finally recovered. Soon after, he looked at the bloody monk in front of him with fear in his eyes. If this bloody monk was really a dead person like Xiao He had said, then it would be too terrifying. A dead person could actually release such a terrifying slaughter chi. How terrifying must this bloody monk be when he was alive? Surrounded by ancient Buddhas, Zhuo Wen slowly walked to the front of the monk in blood-red clothes. At this moment, the monk was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. His hands were placed on his knees as if he was meditating. However, Zhuo Wen discovered that there was an extremely dense death chi lingering between the bloody monk's eyebrows. There was no sign of life on his body. He was really a dead man. Zhuo Wenkai couldn't see it clearly because the murderous aura on the monk's body was so dense that it covered the aura of death. This bloody monk should be a very powerful Emperor Realm expert when he was alive. If I'm not wrong, his strength should be above Jianmu's. However, I don't know how he died in this basin. Xiao He said cautiously. Then the formation of the vital vein underground should be related to this person? Zhuo Wen suddenly asked. Xiao He nodded and said, it must be related. The abhijna of a high-level Emperor Realm expert is not something you can imagine. They can open up a space, move mountains and fill seas. It's extremely terrifying. However, what I find strange is that this person is clearly a monk. Why would he break his precepts and kill someone? It's really strange. Zhuo Wen was surprised. In his mind, monks were amiable, kind and benevolent. However, the bloody monk in the cave had subverted Zhuo Wen's good impression of monks. The bloody monk's slaughter chi was even more terrifying than some demons. Buzz. Just as Zhuo Wen was deep in thought, the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade that was stuck in front of the monk suddenly let out a clear and melodious cry. Then, it suddenly flew out and headed straight for Zhuo Wen. At the moment when the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade swept over, the mighty slaughter chi in the entire grotto began to boil. It turned into a blood-red vortex along with the blade, as if the entire grotto was about to be wiped out by the slaughter chi. What's the matter with the bloody Buddhist commandment blade? Why is it coming towards me? Looking at the bloody Buddhist commandment blade, Zhuo Wen's pupils shrank to the size of needles. Immediately he pinched out an orchid hand seal. Under the Buddhist power of the Buddha's eye, he blasted out a palm and hit the bloody Buddhist commandment blade heavily. Bang! However, the bloody Buddhist commandment blade was extremely sharp. It swept over and slashed fiercely. Immediately, Zhuo Wen's Buddha's palm was shattered. Damn it! Zhuo Wen cursed angrily. Suddenly, he evolved 4 heads and 8 arms. His 8 arms made orchid hand seals at the same time. The Buddha's light filled the sky and the Buddhas will spread throughout the cave. Countless golden palm prints came from all directions and smashed heavily on the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade. Surging Buddhist power gushed out, and the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade buzzed. The murderous aura on its surface surged to the extreme, and the terrifying blood-red blade light formed a hurricane that swept out. Boom! 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 Zhuo Wen was shocked to find that the countless Buddha's palms could not withstand a single blow from the bloody Buddhist commandment blade. They collapsed inch by inch and turned into golden powder. Is this the bloody Buddhist commandment blade? At the moment when the Buddha's palms burst, Zhuo Wen's pupils shrank to the extreme. He kept retreating. The palm just now could not stop the bloody Buddhist commandment blade. Zhuo Wen really did not expect it to be so powerful. One had to know that this was only a weapon, yet it was able to emit such a terrifying power. This truly shocked Zhuo Wen. This bloody Buddhist commandment blade is definitely not simple. Boy, be careful. The bloody blade is coming again. Xiao Hei stood on Zhuowen's shoulder with a dignified look in her eyes. Even without Xiao Hei's reminder, Zhuan knew that the bloody Buddhist commandment blade was not simple. At this moment, after the bloody Buddhist commandment blade broke the Buddha's palm, it swept toward Zhuan again. Second-level bedevilment. Angry seal. Morning seal. The bloody Buddhist commandment blade gave Zhuan too much pressure, so Zhuan had to use all his strength. Suddenly he entered the second-level bedevilment state. His bloody hair grew crazily to his waist, and the anger in his body turned into a real anger, burning all over his body, making Zhuowen's strength suddenly increase by 30%. The moment the morning seal was used, a sorrowful mood spread and fell on the bloody Buddhist commandment blade in front of him, greatly weakening the power of the bloody Buddhist commandment blade. In the second-level bedevilment state, coupled with the enhancement of the angry seal, Zhuowen's combat power was very terrifying. Zhuan squeezed his right hand, and suddenly a bloody spear appeared, rushing toward the bloody Buddhist commandment blade without fear. Boom, boom, boom. The bloody spear was like a big windmill, splitting into countless bloody spear shadows, fighting with the bloody Buddhist commandment blade. The sound of metal clashing echoed in the cave. The bloody Buddhist commandment blade was indeed powerful. Under the weakening of the morning seal, its combat power was still so terrifying. Not only was Zhuan unable to suppress the bloody Buddhist commandment blade, but he was also at a disadvantage. Kill, kill, kill. Zhuowen let out a furious roar. He was extremely crazy. The blood spear danced unceasingly. Murderous demonic qi churned, forming a powerful blood cloud in the sky above the cave. Moreover, Yun had the core of the blood soul tree, which contained a strong vitality, so he was not afraid of being hurt at all. He was almost desperate to fight the bloody Buddhist commandment blade, and finally, he completely suppressed the bloody Buddhist commandment blade. Kill! Zhuan raised the bloody spear above his head with both hands, and then slammed it down on the bloody Buddhist commandment blade. Suddenly, the bloody Buddhist commandment blade screeched and fell to the ground. After all, the bloody Buddhist commandment blade was an object without an owner. Although it contained a trace of spiritual intelligence, it was a weapon after all. Without the control and use of a person, it could not exert its full power. Zhuowen landed on the ground and touched the blood-red Buddhist monk's blade with his right hand. Following this, a terrifying killing intent flowed through the blood-red Buddhist monk's blade, trying to invade Zhuowen's body. Buddha's eye suppression. Zhuowen's eyes were extremely calm. He immediately opened his Buddha's eye, and the Buddha's light spread, completely blocking the terrifying slaughter devil qi from the bloody Buddhist commandment blade. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The bloody Buddhist commandment blade buzzed, and then the slaughter devil qi in the cave went crazy, pouring into the bloody Buddhist commandment blade. Then, the power of the bloody Buddhist commandment blade soared to the extreme. Zhuan did not expect that the bloody Buddhist commandment blade could be strengthened. Caught off guard, his right arm was mercilessly cut off by the bloody Buddhist commandment blade. Taking a few steps back, Zhuan covered his broken right arm and gloomily stared at the bloody Buddhist commandment blade that was suspended in the air again. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The moment his right arm was cut off, Yun had already mobilized the vitality of the blood soul tree in his heart to flow into his right arm. Suddenly, the flesh on the wound began to wriggle, and then a new arm grew out. With a wave of his right hand, Yun picked up the bloody spear that had fallen to the ground again. He slowly stepped back, staring at the bloody Buddhist commandment blade in front of him that was in the endless bloody vortex. At this moment, the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade was unusually violent. The aura in its body had also exploded to the extreme. The terrifying murderous aura spread out, faintly making Zhuowen's heart tremble. How can it be so terrifying? This bloody Buddhist commandment blade is much more terrifying than an ordinary emperor weapon, isn't it? Zhuan murmured in a low voice, and his eyes were filled with fear. No. This bloody Buddhist commandment blade is a little strange. No matter how powerful an emperor weapon is, how can it exert such terrifying power? Xiao Hei suddenly said, "What do you mean?" Zhuan narrowed his eyes and asked, Chapter 1041. Divine Sense, a Strand of Divine Sense? At this moment, Zhuowen's gaze became extremely solemn. He knew that emperor weapons could nurture a strand of intelligence, so they were much more terrifying than regular monarch spirit treasures. Although this was the case, an emperor weapon was only a weapon. Without the support of its owner, it would not be able to display much of its power. After all, a weapon could only display its greatest power in the hands of a martial artist. Otherwise, its power would be greatly reduced. If Zhuon unleashed his full strength, his strength would far surpass that of regular celestial venerables. It was more than enough to deal with an ownerless emperor weapon. However, the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade was far more terrifying than Zhuon had expected. It was as if someone was controlling the blade to kill. The blood-red Buddhist commandment blade buzzed again. The blade tore through space and arrived before Zhuon in an instant. It slashed down fiercely. Terrifying slaughter chi condensed into countless rays of blade light. The blade slashed down, as if the entire space was about to be destroyed. Zhuon's expression changed slightly. He thrust out his blood-red spear, splitting it into streaks of blood-red spear shadows. They collided with the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade. Terrifying power erupted, and thunderous booms rang out endlessly. Thump, thump, thump. Zhuon could not help but retreat under the power. Ever since the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade had absorbed all the slaughter chi in the cavern, it had become much more powerful than before. It directly suppressed Zhuon. With a strand of the monk's divine sense, you're no match for the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade, Xiao He said gravely. Then what should I do? Yun also sensed that something was off and hurriedly asked. It's just a mere Emperor Realm expert's divine sense. Kid, restrain the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade. I'll erase this divine sense, Xiao He continued. Upon hearing this, Zhuon nodded. He knew that Xiao He was very proficient in spiritual bodies and spiritual force. Naturally, he trusted Xiao He. Don't try to trick me. Also, this blood-red Buddhist commandment blade is very strong. I won't be able to hold on for long. So, you have to end this quickly, Zhuon said to Xiao He. As soon as he said that, Xiao He staggered. What kind of nonsense was this brat saying? When had he, the Dragon Lord, ever cheated this brat? Of course, even if he had cheated Zhuon, with Xiao He's personality, he would never admit it. When the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade comes over, you'll restrain it. When the time comes, I'll enter the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade. Don't let the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade attack empty. Otherwise, with the power of the blade, one slash will greatly damage my vitality. When it came to serious matters, Xiao He became much more serious. The blood-red Buddhist commandment blade was very powerful. Xiao He was just a spiritual body. If he was hit, his vitality would definitely be greatly damaged. Understood. Hide first. Don't let the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade discover you. Zhuon nodded. His right hand tightened on the blood-red spear as he stared cautiously at the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade that was dozens of meters away from him. Ha! This time, Zhuon took the initiative to pounce forward. With a stomp of his foot, a terrifying force gushed out. His entire body was like a rock spreading its wings. The blood-red spear swept out and displayed the Azura blood spear force. An endless sea of blood swept out around him. Buzz. The blood-red Buddhist commandment blade was not to be outdone. With a wave of its blade, it was wrapped in a terrifying murderous aura. It broke through the air and flew towards Zhuon. The blood-red Buddhist commandment blade was obviously a little angry at Zhuon's provocation. Bang, bang, bang. The man and the blade fought again. Although Zhuon tried his best, he was still at an absolute disadvantage. Every time the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade slashed out, the power on it became more and more terrifying. Zhuon's knees even began to bend, and the web between his thumb and forefinger began to bleed. Clang! The blood-red Buddhist commandment blade swung down again, and the sound of metal clashing was heard. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in Zhuon's eyes. The moment the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade swung down, he reached out his right hand without any regard for his life and pinched the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade. The blood-red Buddhist commandment blade obviously did not expect the human in front of it to have such a move. The blade instantly froze. "Xiaohei now. Go." Zhuan roared. Suddenly, a wisp of black light swept out from his body and fiercely drilled into the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade. The moment the wisp of black light drilled into the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade, the blade suddenly went berserk. With a wave of the blade, Zhuowen's arm, which was holding the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade, was directly cut off and blood spurted out. Buzz. The moment Zhuowen's right arm was cut off, the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade was really angry. It took advantage of the situation and swept toward Zhuowen again. Its target was Zhuowen's heart. Zhuowen's face changed slightly. He stepped on the soles of his feet and instantly avoided the vital part of his body. However, the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade directly pierced into Zhuowen's shoulder blade and then went through his back. Suddenly, a bloody hole appeared. Blood gushed out from the bloody hole like a faucet that was not turned on properly. Tut, tut, tut. Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood and kept retreating. Looking at the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade in the sky, his eyes were full of horror. The blood-red Buddhist commandment blade was so terrifying. How could it be so powerful? Is Xiaohei still not healed? Zhuowen murmured. The bloody hole began to slowly heal under the strong vitality. The vitality in the core of the blood soul tree was constantly decreasing in the process of healing Zhuowen's injuries. After all, the vitality in the core of the blood soul tree was not endless. There would be a time when it would be exhausted. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The blood-red Buddhist commandment blade did not give up. It swept toward Zhuowen again, intending to kill Zhuowen completely. Damn it! There's no end to this guy. Zhuowen cursed in a low voice. He rolled like a wild donkey and dodged the attack of the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade. However, the powerful blade chi of the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade overflowed and scratched Zhuowen's thigh. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The blood-red Buddhist commandment blade slashed out again and again. Every slash left a serious injury on Zhuowen's body. Fortunately, Yuan was able to accurately avoid his vital parts every time. In addition to the strong vitality in the core of the blood soul tree, he was able to avoid many slashes. Even so, Yuan was in an extremely sorry state under the repeated slashes. His body was covered in blood and he looked like a terrifying blood man. "Xiaohei, are you still not done? I can't hold on any longer." Looking at the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade that was about to strike again, Zhuowen's heart skipped a beat. He could not help but roar at Xiaohei. Swoosh! The blood-red Buddhist commandment blade swept out again. However, this time, its speed was much faster than before. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Zhuowen. The sharp blade flicked upwards, intending to cut Zhuowen in half. "Dodge!" Zhuowen roared. He took a step and at the same time, he held the blood spear horizontally in an attempt to block the slash. Bang! Under the slash, the blood spear was directly sent flying. The terrifying blade light swept past in an instant. Then, Zhuowen's entire right shoulder was cut off by the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade. Zhuowen sucked in a breath of cold air as blood gushed out from his wound. Thankfully, he was able to rely on his powerful life force to stop the bleeding. However, this injury was too serious and his severed right shoulder did not immediately regenerate. "Oh no! I can't face the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade in my current state." Looking at the serious injury on his body, Zhuowen gasped. Looking at the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade in front of him again, Zhuowen's heart was filled with despair. Swoosh! In an instant, the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade came in front of Zhuowen again. It wanted to completely cut off Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen no longer had the extra strength to dodge. He could only watch the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade come at him again. Clang! When the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade was only a few inches away from Zhuowen's forehead, it suddenly stopped. Then, it fell to the ground with a crisp tinkling sound. Zhuowen, who was originally in despair, looked at this scene and let out a sigh of relief. He knew that Xiaohei, who had entered the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade, had successfully erased the divine thought in the blade. Sure enough, a black light swept out from the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade that fell to the ground. It turned into Xiao Hei's appearance and came in front of Zhuan. Why are you in such a sorry state? Xiao Hei also saw Zhuan with his right shoulder cut off and could not help but ask. Looking at Xiao Hei's ignorant face, Zhuan gritted his teeth and said, "It's all because of the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade. You went in for so long. Why did you only come out now? If you came out a little later, I would have been finished by now." The divine thought in the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade was quite powerful. It took a lot of this Dragon Lord's time and energy. Xiao Hei laughed dryly. Zhuan nodded. He did not blame Xiao Hei on this point. Instead, he asked cautiously, "Did you find any clues in that divine thought?" Speaking of which, the background of this blood-red monk is not ordinary. He seems to be from the Great Thunderclap Temple in the Divine Nether Realm. However, this guy is a traitor of the Great Thunderclap Temple. He violated the commandments and committed a heinous crime. He was wanted in the 9 Netherworld realm, so he escaped. However, this unlucky guy, because his injuries were too severe, he finally passed away under the true Vein Forest. Xiao Hei said tirelessly, "The Great Thunderclap Temple in the Divine Nether Realm?" Zhuan was startled. He did not expect that this blood-red monk actually came from the Divine Nether Realm. If he did not guess wrongly, the Divine Nether Realm's inner courtyard was the biggest power in the Divine Nether Realm. However, he did not know how big the Great Thunderclap Temple's power was in the Divine Nether Realm. The Great Thunderclap Temple's power is not small. Although it is not comparable to the Divine Nether Realm's inner courtyard, it is still a famous and powerful power in the Divine Nether Realm. Xiao Hei said indifferently. Then why did this blood-red monk commit such a heinous crime? In the end he ended up like this. It is really sad and lamentable. Zhuan said with a sigh. This blood-red monk's strength was very terrifying. This could be seen from the power of the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade. He was definitely in existence more terrifying than Zhenmu. Moreover, if this blood-red monk did not die, he might have entered the Saint Realm and become famous. Xiao Hei had a strange gaze and said, "Do you know who this blood-red monk worships the most?" Zhuan asked curiously. "Fighting Buddha Demon Saint." Zhuan was startled and his pupils shrank. Chapter 1042. Murderous Oath-Breaking Blade. The Fighting Buddha Demon Saint was definitely an anomaly in that era. After all, since ancient times, the Buddha and the Demon Saint were at odds with each other. However, this Fighting Buddha Demon Saint came from the Buddhist sect, but he cultivated the demonic Tao. He forcefully combined these two opposing forces together and obtained a terrifying power that shook the ancient times. At this point, Blackie looked pitifully at the monk in crimson clothes who was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the cave and continued, "It is because of the example of the Fighting Buddha Demon Saint that the monk in crimson clothes worships him blindly. He even learned to cultivate the demonic way of massacre. He wants to combine the demonic way of massacre with his Buddhist way and obtain the strength of the Fighting Buddha Demon Saint." Unfortunately, the monk's talent and luck were not as good as the Fighting Buddha Demon Saint's. Moreover, the Great Thunderclap Temple found out that he cultivated the demonic way of massacre and put him on the wanted list. Because of that, he committed a monstrous massacre and ended up like this. Zhuan looked at the monk in blood-red clothes with pity when he heard that. The monk in blood-red clothes was really pitiful. He was actually hunted down because of this and died before he could even become a saint. The monk's strength is not bad. From his divine sense, he should be an 8th-level martial emperor. The Buddhist commandment blade in his hand contains both the Buddhist way and the demonic way. "It might be of great help to you in the future," Xiao Hei said to Zhuan. Zhuan nodded. The injury on his right shoulder had completely healed. He extended his right hand and held the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade in his hand. Suddenly, a terrifying murderous aura flowed from his right arm into Zhuan's body. The murderous aura in the blood-red Buddhist commandment blade is so dense. If someone with a weak mind were to obtain such a weapon, Wouldn't he be controlled by the blade and become its slave? Zhuowen frowned slightly. With a thought, he switched the Buddha eye to the demon eye. He let the demon eye suck in the horrifying murderous aura until it was within Zhuowen's tolerance. Could you, who possess the Buddha demon eyes, are actually very suitable to cultivate the martial arts of this blood-robed monk. This monk is quite talented. He combined the Devil Tao of Massacre with the Buddhist Tao and called it the Buddhist Tao of Massacre. If you can master the Buddhist Tao of Massacre, I'm afraid you can really become a second fighting Buddha demon sage. Xiao He clicked her tongue in wonder. Slaughtering Buddhism? Zhuan was startled, and then he asked Xiao He, could it be that the monk didn't leave anything else in his spiritual sense? I knew you would ask about this. The monk in crimson clothes did leave behind some things. In his divine consciousness, there were some insights about the Buddhist way of massacre and a set of self-created saber techniques. Xiao He chuckled. How could he have comprehended the slaughter Buddha Tao and created his own blade technique? Let me have a look, Zhuon said to Xiao He as his interest was piqued. I'll pass it to you through my divine consciousness. Take your time to look at it. As she spoke, Xiao He waved her little claw. Suddenly, a crimson light swept out and penetrated into Zhuowen's glabella. Zhuon felt a pain in his head, and he realized that there was some unfamiliar information in his sea of consciousness. Most of the information was about the monk in crimson clothes' comprehension of the Buddhist way of massacre. Of course, other than the comprehension, there was also a set of blade technique in the information. Slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique? Zhuon muttered to himself. The blade technique was called the slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique. It was a powerful blade technique that the monk in crimson clothes had created by combining the Devil Tao of Massacre with the Buddhist way of massacre. According to the monk in crimson clothes' divine consciousness, he had once used the slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique to kill a level 9 emperor when he was a level 8 emperor. It was a terrifying and powerful blade technique. The slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique had a total of 5 styles. They were the destruction of life, chaotic mortal world, abstinence from life, absolute wisdom, and samsara in the sea of bitterness. In the monk in crimson clothes' divine consciousness, the 5th style of the 5 styles contained the power of reincarnation. When the blade was slashed out, time and space would be reincarnated. It was extremely terrifying. Since the bladesmanship is called the slaughtering oath-breaking bladesmanship, then this Buddhist commandment blade is the slaughtering oath-breaking bladesmanship? Zhuowen raised the Buddhist commandment blade in his hand, his eyes revealing a hint of contemplation. You're right. The Buddhist commandment blade in your hand is called the slaughtering oath-breaking blade. Originally, the Buddhist commandment blade should be a blade worn by monks. According to the commandment, it is only allowed to cut clothes and is not allowed to kill. However, the monk in crimson clothes used the Buddhist commandment blade in his hand to kill. Originally, his Buddhist commandment blade had no name. However, after he committed the sin of killing, he named it the slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique. Kid, you have to be more serious. The slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique and the blade technique are both terrifying. This set of blade technique can allow you to use it until you reach the high-level emperor realm. Xiao He came in front of Zhuowen and said faintly. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. He knew very well how terrifying the slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique was. Moreover, the slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique contained both the Devil Tao of Massacre and the Buddhist way. After cultivating it, it might be beneficial for him to master the Buddha demon eye in the future. After putting away the slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique and the blade technique, Zhuan looked at the monk in crimson clothes who was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the cave. Although you left your divine will in the slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique to kill me, you were able to create the slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique. This is enough to prove your greatness. Now that I have inherited your slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique, I can be considered half your disciple. Having said that, Zhuan knelt down on both knees and respectfully kowtowed twice to the monk in crimson clothes. However, when he kowtowed, the monk in crimson clothes suddenly revealed a smile as if he was gratified. Then, he turned into a wisp of blood qi and completely disappeared into the air. It seems that the physical body of the monk in crimson clothes has been destroyed long ago. The body in the cave is probably the manifestation of the monk's unreconciled obsession. It seems that your actions just now have converted it. Xiao He said in a strange manner. When Zhuan saw this scene, a strange look appeared in his eyes. He did not expect that his kowtowing would cause the remnant obsession of the monk in crimson clothes to dissipate. Since this matter has been settled, we should leave. This time, the Yuan vein explosion in the True Vein Forest caused a huge commotion. I'm afraid that it has attracted many experts from Anming City. It's better for us to leave as soon as possible. Xiao He said to Zhuan. Nodding his head, Zhuan also had the same intention. With a step, he left the cave and rushed towards the blood-colored tunnel. The slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique of the monk in crimson clothes was an extremely powerful emperor weapon. It could only unleash its greatest power when combined with the slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique. With Zhuowen's current cultivation level, he would need to spend a lot of time to comprehend it. Therefore, Zhuan planned to return and study the slaughtering oath-breaking blade technique. Master! When Zhuan arrived at the corner of the tunnel, Xiang was still quietly waiting there. When he saw Zhuan come out, he respectfully greeted him. Let's leave this place. Otherwise, we will attract more and more people. Zhuan nodded his head. Soon after, he led Xiang out of the tunnel. Following which, they rushed towards the top of the tunnel at lightning speed. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Zhuan and Xiang finally exited the tunnel. The Yuan Qi pillar in the sky was still connected to the heavens like a heavenly pillar. It was extremely terrifying. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At this moment, more than 10 figures had already appeared above the Yuan Qi pillar. These figures were ecstatic as they rushed around the Yuan Qi pillar. They were actually collecting the spirit stones that were gushing out from the tunnel. Oh, someone came out from the tunnel? The instant Zhuowen and Xiang emerged from the tunnel, the figures that were snatching the spirit stones from the Yuan Qi pillar stopped one after another. Their gazes all gathered on Zhuowen and Xiang. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. In an instant, more than 10 figures on the Yuan Qi pillar swooped down and arrived in front of Zhuowen and Xiang. These people had different appearances and weapons in their hands. However, they were all very strong. Among them, there were about 8 at the peak of the Golden Exalt realm, 5 at the early stage of the Heavenly Exalt realm, and 1 at the intermediate stage of the Heavenly Exalt realm. The intermediate stage Heavenly Exalt warrior was dressed in black. His long hair was mottled with black and white. He was a middle-aged man in his 40s. The others looked at him with awe. Did you just come out from the tunnel? What's inside? The middle-aged man with black and white hair asked Zhuowen coldly. There's nothing. There are enough spirit stones in the entire Yuan vein for you to divide among yourselves. Therefore, I don't want to have any dispute with you, Zhuowen said indifferently. After obtaining the inheritance of the monk in red, Zhuowen had actually obtained the most precious thing in the entire Yuan vein. Moreover, he and Xiang had also obtained a considerable amount of top-grade spirit stones from the tunnel. Zhuowen had long lost interest in the spirit stones that gushed out from the Yuan Qi pillar outside. There's nothing? In that case, you can leave your spirit ring and get lost, the middle-aged man with black and white hair said coldly as he stared at Zhuowen indifferently. As soon as these words were spoken, the 13 people behind him looked at Zhuowen with ridicule in their eyes. All of them could sense that the young man before them was merely at the sovereign stage, and the Yuan energy pillar was gushing out from the crack. Moreover, the two of them had just come out from the crack. Who would believe that there was nothing good in the crack? You want me to leave my spirit ring and get lost? Zhuowen's eyes were very calm, so calm that it was frightening. But Black and White Boss asked you to get lost. Are you unhappy? Are you planning to resist? You should know that if you choose to do this, the consequences will be very serious. A warrior at the peak of the Golden Exalt realm walked out from behind the black and white-haired man. His aura exploded as he stared at Zhuowen indifferently. Obviously, this person wanted to show off in front of the black and white-haired man. Why don't you try and let me know how serious the consequences are? Zhuowen suddenly said with a smile. The warrior at the peak of the Golden Exalt realm was stunned. He did not expect Zhuowen to say such provocative words. Was there really something wrong with his head? Since you want to know, I'll let you experience the consequences of resisting black and white boss. Chapter 1043. Black-white sand. Looking at the incoming fist, Zhuowen's gaze was indifferent. He pushed with his right hand and caught the fist. Then he fiercely twisted it. Crack. The smile on the peak golden venerate's face froze before it could fully bloom. Then he felt a heart-wrenching pain from the fist. Ah! A blood-curdling scream was heard. The black and white-haired middle-aged man and the group of people who were looking at them with a mocking expression froze as they looked at the scene in front of them in astonishment. The fist of the peak golden venerate was caught in the palm of Zhuowen's hand. Then, Yuan casually squeezed and the peak golden venerate's right hand was twisted in an irregular manner. Lin Fan's left hand formed a palm and landed on the right arm of the peak golden venerate. Terrifying Yuan power invaded the peak golden venerate's right arm like a meat grinder. The peak golden venerate's right arm crumbled inch by inch and turned into a bloody mist. Dang dang dang. With his right arm destroyed, the pinnacle golden exalt took a step back and retreated. Looking at the young man in front of him, his face was filled with shock and anger. Until now, he still couldn't react. How did he lose his right arm? The young man's attack speed was too fast. Was this still the strength that a supreme exalt could display? You can't beat me and you want to leave? Do you think it will be so easy? Zhuowen snorted coldly and took a step forward. In an instant, he was in front of the peak golden exalt who was retreating. His right hand formed into a claw and grabbed the peak golden exalt's left arm. Then, a golden light flashed on Zhuowen's left hand and he threw a punch. It landed heavily on the peak golden venerate's chest. With a muffled sound, the peak golden venerate was turned into a bloody mist before he could even make a sound. You dare to kill him? The black and white-haired middle-aged man narrowed his eyes and a terrifying force burst out. He stared coldly at Zhuowen and shouted. But he wanted to kill me, but he was not strong enough. Shouldn't he be killed by me? Zhuowen lifted his head and stared calmly at the black and white-haired man. Good. A mere supreme realm cultivator actually dared to speak such arrogant words. You've really eaten the guts of a leopard. Do you really think that you're invincible just because you killed a peak golden venerable? The black and white-haired man's gaze turned even colder. You talk too much. Xiang, kill all these eyesores. Staring at the murderous middle-aged man with long black and white hair, Yuan didn't want to say anything and directly ordered Xiang. Anming City was only a small and remote city. It was impossible for a city like this to have an Emperor Realm expert. It might not even have a peak Empyrean. Therefore, Xiang Tianzuan could be considered an overlord in Anming City. After Zhuowen finished speaking, Xiang Tianzuan, who had been standing behind Zhuowen, stepped forward and stood in front of Zhuowen. He said respectfully, Master, are we going to kill them all? Other than these 13 people, there are still quite a few people over there. As he spoke, Xiang Tianzuan pointed to more figures outside the origin energy pillar. These cultivators' cultivation wasn't as high as the black and white-haired man's group. Therefore, they were the other cultivators of Anming City who were excluded by the black and white-haired man's group. Forget about those people. Just kill these 13 eyesores. Zhuowen said indifferently. When Zhuowen said those words, the 13 people who were led by the black and white-haired man immediately glared at Zhuowen. This brat was too arrogant. Could it be that he thought the servant by his side could kill the 13 of them? Boom. However, the moment a terrifying aura burst out, the black and white-haired man and the other 13 people were stunned. Their throats trembled as they swallowed their saliva. This aura was so terrifying, it was like the might of the heavens. Heavenly Venerable? The black and white-haired man opened his mouth and spat out those words with difficulty. He couldn't help but take a few steps back. His gaze landed on Zhuowen, who was behind Xiang. A mere supreme-level cultivator actually had a peak heavenly venerable guard. How did this kid do it? Could it be that this kid's background was extremely terrifying? Young master. Just now, we had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. We were blind dogs. We hope that young master can let us go. The black and white-haired man and his group immediately cupped their hands and begged for mercy when Xiang's peak heavenly venerable cultivation erupted. The black and white-haired man was the strongest in their group, but he was only a mid-stage heavenly venerable. If he encountered a peak heavenly venerable, he would definitely be crushed. As for the black and white-haired man, his eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking, but his face had turned extremely ugly. Kill! Zhuowen's gaze was indifferent. He was unmoved and simply spat out that word. Boom! The moment Zhuowen spat out the word, kill, Xiang Tianzuan also moved. 3 huge Xiang wheels rose from his body and rushed towards the 13 people in front of him. Run! The black and white-haired man shouted. With a stomp of his foot, he rushed towards the back at an extremely fast speed. Do you think you can escape? Zhuowen said indifferently. With a stomp of his foot, 3 pairs of lightning wings appeared on his back. Like a bolt of lightning, he intercepted the black and white-haired man in midair. Xiang! Kill the other 12. I'll kill this guy. Lightning flashed as Zhuowen arrived in front of the black and white-haired man and ordered Xing. Xiang nodded. He didn't have any objections. He was well aware of Zhuowen's terrifying battle strength, so he wasn't worried that the black and white-haired man would pose any threat to Zhuowen. Kill! Xiang shouted. With his 3-wheeled Xiang, he rushed towards the remaining 12 people, not letting any of them go. You're really arrogant. A mere supreme being dares to intercept me. Are you really courting death? When he saw that Ziyang had really obeyed Zhuowen's orders and pursued the other 12 people, the black and white-haired man heaved a sigh of relief, and his gaze carried a trace of cruelty and contempt as he looked at the young man before him. The commotion here also attracted the attention of many cultivators outside the Yuan Qi pillar. They quickly recognized the black and white-haired man. It's black and white sand. Just now, black and white sand coveted the things on the 2 people who came out of the crack. It looks like the 2 sides have started fighting. Black and white sand kicked an iron plate. The black-haired youth's cultivation is indeed weak, but his battle strength isn't. Moreover, the blue-clothed man is even more terrifying. He's actually a peak heavenly venerable expert. They're finished. That black-clothed youth is actually facing black and white sand alone. What's that guy doing? Does he want to fight black and white sand alone? The confrontation between Zhuowen and black and white sand immediately attracted the attention of the crowd. Especially when the crowd discovered that Zhuowen's aura was only at the Supreme Being realm, there was a flurry of discussion and whispers. It's Zhuowen? Among the crowd, 2 figures' gazes suddenly converged on Zhuowen, who was facing black and white sand, and they couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. The 2 figures were a man and a woman. If Zhuowen were here, he would definitely be able to recognize them. They were actually the Sun family's patriarch, Sun Xing, and his daughter, Sun Jia. This Zhuowen is actually facing black and white sand. Isn't he a bit arrogant? Sun Jia frowned. Young Master Zhuo's strength is extraordinary. Last time, he was able to kill the armored crocodile. This proves that his battle strength is actually not weaker than a mid-stage heavenly venerable. He should be able to withstand black and white sand. Sun Xing shook his head. At this moment, black and white sand stared indifferently at Zhuowen and said coldly, "Later, when you are killed by me, don't blame me for being merciless. I should be the one saying that. I feel that the one who will be killed is not me, but you." Zhuowen replied indifferently. You are very confident and arrogant. However, people like you die very early. After black and white sand finished speaking, he took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of Zhuowen. He raised his hands and a black and white saber appeared in his hands. Yin-yang saber. With a roar, He Sha swung his black and white sabers. Immediately, a spinning pattern of yin and yang appeared behind him. A terrifying force of yin and yang shot out of his hands, turning into 2 huge saber shadows of yin and yang intertwined in the air. Rumble! The huge yin-yang saber shadow descended from the void and slashed toward Zhuowen's head, wanting to cut Zhuowen in half. Morning treasure seal. Zhuowen let out an indifferent cry. A mysterious seal descended from the void. Soon after, a sorrowful feeling spread out. Like a curse, it landed on black white sand's body. Why did my strength suddenly drop? The moment the sorrowful feeling spread out, Black and White Sand's face changed drastically. He clearly felt that his entire body was powerless and his strength had dropped drastically. At the same time, he felt a sense of sadness in his heart and his mood fell. Nirvana of the Great Sun. Zhuan roared and grew 4 heads and 8 arms. He stepped into the void and instantly appeared in front of Black and White Sand. His 8 arms struck out fiercely and golden light burst out, directly resisting the black and white yin-yang saber shadow in the void. Rumble. After being weakened by the Morning Treasure Seal, Black and White Sand's strength had dropped drastically. The power of the black and white saber shadow was also greatly weakened. Bang, bang, bang. Zhuan threw out punch after punch and golden light gathered in the air to form a golden universe. It looked extremely bright and dazzling. Gotcha. Finally, Zhuan threw out another punch. This punch was wrapped in earth-shaking power and it landed heavily on the black and white yin-yang saber shadow. Suddenly, the entire saber shadow space shook and the space shattered into pieces. The black and white saber shadow also shattered into pieces. Die! After breaking through the saber shadow, Zhuan took a step forward and immediately appeared in front of Black and White Sand. His 8 arms smashed down heavily and earth-shattering power spread out, causing Black and White Sand's face to change drastically. At that moment, he was cursed by the Morning Treasure Seal and his strength had been greatly weakened. Moreover, Zhuan's strength had far exceeded his expectations. Black and White Saber Shield. Black and White Sand roared angrily. He held his sabers horizontally and the black and white sabers merged together to form a huge saber shield, blocking in front of him. It's useless. 100 feet body, break. Zhuan roared and his body grew to a height of 100 feet. Then, his mountain-like arms swung down from the sky and smashed on the saber shield. Gotcha! Chapter 1044. Handing in the mission in the end, the cracks on the black and white shield became more and more terrifying. Finally, it completely shattered. Then Zhuan's 8 arms hammered down, and the black and white shield completely shattered into dust. Die! The moment the black and white shield shattered, Zhuan's 8 arms hammered down again, slamming into the black and white sand. The black and white sand didn't even make a sound before exploding into a cloud of blood mist. The moment the black and white sand died, the battle on Xiang Tianzuan's side was also completely over. Xiang took a step forward and returned to Zhuan's side, standing respectfully behind him. Looking at the black and white sand that was easily killed, the cultivators outside the Origin Chi Pillar felt as if they had been struck by lightning. They were stunned on the spot, their eyes fixed on Zhu. Black and White Sand, a mid-stage heavenly venerable, was killed by a supreme stage youth just like that? This scene would probably be imprinted in everyone's minds for a long time, like a shadow that would linger for a long time. This Zhuan seems to be even stronger than before? Sun Jia was also a little stunned and couldn't help muttering in a low voice. Sun Xing also had a look of awe. The black and white sand was much stronger than him, but Zhuan could easily kill him. This was enough to show that Zhuan could kill him as easily as crushing an ant. It's a pity that young Master Zhua isn't willing to become the son-in-law of our Sun family. However, with young Master Zhua's talent, I'm sure he doesn't like our Sun family, right? Sun Xing whispered with some pity. Hearing this, the complex look in Sun Jia's beautiful eyes became even more intense. Looking at the imposing figure bathed in golden light, she suddenly remembered how she had made things difficult for Zhuan in the True Vein Forest. Now that she thought about it, how laughable it was. Master, the density of the Origin Chi Pillar is much denser than the Origin Chi Pillar in the main city. I'm afraid it's quite beneficial for our cultivation. Look at us. Xiang suddenly stopped Zhuan and pointed at the terrifying Origin Chi Pillar behind them with his right hand. He whispered to Zhuan. You're right. Let's cultivate here for a while before returning. Zhuan nodded. He was also tempted. His cultivation had already reached the peak of the Sovereign Realm, and he was very close to the Golden Exalt Realm. He could use this Yuan Chi Pillar to raise his cultivation to the Golden Exalt Realm. As they spoke, the two of them took a step forward and instantly arrived at the core area of the Yuan Chi Pillar. There was a rather large empty space there. Zhuan and Xiang sat there as if there was no one else around, and began to refine the rich yuan qi around them. The other people outside the yuan qi pillar looked at the two people sitting in the core area with fear in their eyes. These two people were too terrifying. Even Black White Sands group was easily killed, so they naturally did not dare to make any moves. They only dared to quietly cultivate or search for spirit stones in the outer area. Time gradually passed, and a month quickly passed. Although the yuan qi pillar was also gradually thinning with the passage of time, it was also gradually thinning. After all, it was impossible for the yuan qi in this yuan vein to be endless. Rumors about the yuan qi pillar had also spread throughout Anming City. More and more cultivators gathered here in order to search for spirit stones. There were also some who wanted to use the rich yuan qi to cultivate. The two figures sitting cross-legged in the yuan qi pillar had become a common sight for many cultivators over the past month. Although many cultivators would cast their gazes at the two figures from time to time, no one dared to provoke them. This was because everyone still remembered that an early-stage heavenly exalt cultivator wanted to enter the core area of the yuan qi pillar to cultivate, so he rashly rushed in. When he wanted to chase away the two figures, the blue-clothed man only used one move to kill the early-stage heavenly exalt cultivator in front of everyone. Even an early-stage heavenly exalt cultivator had died at the hands of the blue-clothed man. Naturally, no one else dared to provoke or enter the core area of the yuan qi pillar. Finally, among the two figures that were originally motionless, a black-clothed youth slowly opened his eyes. A terrifying aura surged out from his body, forming a hurricane around him. "I've broken through the early-stage golden exalt realm." Zhuan revealed a smile. In a month, with the help of the rich yuan qi pillar, he had finally broken through the barrier of the peak sovereign realm and successfully advanced to the golden exalt realm. "Congratulations, master." Xiang Tianzuan also stood up. He also saw that Zhuan's cultivation had broken through and hurriedly congratulated him. "Xiang, how much longer will it take for you to advance to the emperor realm?" Zhuan suddenly asked. He could feel that Xiang Tianzuan was only a step away from the emperor realm. Xiang Tianzuan revealed a wry smile and said, "This is hard to say. After all, it's not that easy to break through to the emperor realm. Although this subordinate has already taken half a step into the emperor realm, it's still hard to say for sure." Hearing this, Zhuan nodded. He also knew that it was difficult to break through to the emperor realm. After all, Lu Hantian had stayed at the peak heavenly exalt realm for a long time before breaking through to the emperor realm. Although Xiang Tianzuan's talent was also very strong, there was still a gap between him and Lu Hantian. If there were no special fortuitous encounters, it would be difficult to break through to the emperor realm. There's no hurry. After all, it's not that easy to break through to the emperor realm. What you should do now is to accumulate more. Once you've accumulated enough, you'll be able to break through. At that time, it'll be time for you to soar into the sky." Zhuan said lightly. Xiang Tianzuan nodded. His eyes were full of approval. The Emperor realm was different from the Four Supremes realm. It wasn't something that could be successfully advanced by relying on talent. It also required the accumulation of time and energy. "Let's go. It's time to return to Jiaxin College to hand in the mission." Looking at the increasingly thin origin chi pillar in the sky, Zhuan knew that the origin chi pillar would disappear soon. The origin chi vein underground would also slowly disappear with the passage of time. However, this had nothing to do with Zhuan. Whoosh whoosh. As they spoke, the two of them turned into two streams of light and left the place. The moment the two of them left, the other warriors who were originally wandering around the origin chi pillar became restless and rushed towards the core area. After returning to the main city, Zhuan instructed Xiang Tianzuan to return to the inn first. Then, he stepped into the outer courtyard again. Following the winding path, Zhuan arrived at the mission location. The number of people in the mission hall was extremely high. There were constantly people coming and going to accept missions on the light screen. It was very lively. Moreover, Zhuan discovered that the missions in the heaven region had been changed to 10 new missions. The reason for the change was that the previous 10 missions had been successfully completed. This Diba is really not simple. In just a little over a month, he actually completed all 10 missions in the Heaven region? Looking at the 10 new missions in the Heaven region, Yuan frowned slightly and couldn't help but mutter to himself. Previously, all 10 missions in the Heaven region had been accepted by D-Bar alone. Now that the missions had been changed, it could only mean that all 10 missions had been completed. Yuan shook his head and ignored this. He walked directly to the second floor and came to the counter where Bei Xian was. Oh, Zhuo Xiaoyu is here again. Did the mission go smoothly this time? Seeing Yuan come, Bei Xian quickly stood up from his chair and asked with a flushed face. It went quite smoothly. I basically completed all of them. This is the token for this mission. Senior Bei Xian, please take a look. It should be considered a pass, right? Yuan nodded and took out an emerald green pill from his spirit ring. This was the channel opening pill that Yuan had obtained from the Sun family. It was also the token for completing the mission this time. It's the real channel opening pill. Bei Xian took it and looked at it. He nodded and returned the channel opening pill to Yuan. He continued, you have completed the mission this time. The reward for this mission is 30,000 contribution points. This is your reward. Take it. As he spoke, Bei Xian also transferred 30,000 contribution points to Yuan. Originally, Yuan only had 30,000 contribution points. Now, he had an additional 30,000 contribution points. He now had a total of 60,000 contribution points. Senior Bei Xian, I still have some good stuff that I want to exchange for contribution points. Yuan suddenly smiled mysteriously at Bei Xian. Bei Xian's eyes lit up and he laughed. I knew that you would definitely have some good stuff. What is it? Take it out and let me take a look. Yuan nodded and immediately took out a crystal-clear spiritual stone that was filled with Yuan Qi and handed it to Bei Xian. This is a supreme-grade spiritual stone? Bei Xian was stunned at first, then he said with some surprise. A supreme-grade spiritual stone was much rarer than a high-grade spiritual stone. Even in Jiaxin College, it was hard to find such a spiritual stone. Hence, when Bei Xian saw Yuan take out a supreme-grade spiritual stone, he was extremely surprised. Senior Bei Xian, how many contribution points can this supreme-grade spiritual stone be exchanged for? Yuan asked curiously. Bei Xian pondered for a while and said, a supreme-grade spiritual stone can be exchanged for 20,000 contribution points. You must have more than one on you, right? 20,000 contribution points? Yuan was also shocked. He did not expect a supreme-grade spiritual stone to be so valuable. A single one was worth 20,000 contribution points. He had 200 supreme-grade spiritual stones on him. Didn't that mean that he could exchange them for 4 million contribution points? However, Yuan did not plan to exchange all the supreme-grade spiritual stones for contribution points. 200 supreme-grade spiritual stones was a huge sum of money. It was enough to arouse the greed of anyone. Hence, Yuan would not be so foolish to exchange all of them. Thinking about this, Yuan smiled and took out 10 supreme-grade spiritual stones from his spiritual ring. He said, my luck is not bad. During this mission, I found a small yuan vein. Hence, I found these supreme-grade spiritual stones. Looking at the 10 supreme-grade spiritual stones in Yuan's hand, Bei Xian nodded his head. His expression did not change. Instead, he looked at Yuan strangely and said, looks like your luck is not bad. You actually found a small yuan vein during a mission. It's just luck. Senior Bei Xian, please exchange them for contribution points for me. Yuan scratched his head and said naively. Chapter 1045. West Trench City. Hearing Bei Xian's teasing words, Yuan only smiled faintly. He did not feel proud at all. His goal was not limited to the outer court, but the 9 Netherworld realm. He wanted to explore a world that was even bigger than the 9 Netherworld realm. After chatting with Bei Xian for a while, Yuan exchanged for some arcane technique manuals and instructions on how to refine yuan arrays. At the same time, he also exchanged for the materials needed to refine yuan arrays from Bei Xian. Yuan planned to spend some time practicing the method of refining origin formations. He planned to join the Arcana Tower and meet with Mu Feng. After all, Only Mu Feng knew about the key to fusing the 9 types of earth fire, the thousandfold fossil. However, what made Zhuowen's heart ache was that everything related to arcane techniques required an exorbitant amount of contribution points. Zhuowen exchanged for some basic arcane techniques manuals, yuan array materials, and blueprints, which actually cost him a total of 200,000 contribution points. In other words, all the contribution points that Zhuowen exchanged with the supreme-grade spirit stones were spent on the series of items that were refined by the arcane yuan array. Being an arcane master is indeed a money-burning profession. Zhuowen sighed softly and silently in his heart when he saw the number of 60,000 displayed on the contribution technique table. Originally, he planned to exchange for the love seal of the 7 emotions precious seal. Unfortunately, he did not have enough contribution points on him. It seemed like he could only exchange for it next time. Although Zhuowen could take out some supreme-grade spirit stones to exchange for contribution points, Zhuowen had already taken out 20 supreme-grade spirit stones. If he took out more supreme-grade spirit stones now, it would definitely arouse Bei Xian's suspicion. Although Bei Xian did not look like someone who would be tempted by wealth, Zhuowen did not want to take the risk. After storing the yuan array materials and the arcane technique manuals into his spirit ring, Zhuowen bid farewell to Bei Xian and left the mission hall. Walking out of the quest hall, Zhuowen headed straight for the bamboo forest. Right now, he was rather concerned about whether Kanan, Mo Lingtian, and the others had completed their quests. After returning to his residence in the bamboo forest, Zhuowen took out the communication jade token for Jianan's group and sent a message. After which, he quietly waited at his own residence. He knew that Jianan's group would meet up at his residence once they returned to the outer academy. After waiting for more than 2 hours, Zhuowen realized that Mo Lingtian, Kanan, and the others had not come. What's going on? The time limit for Jianan and the others' mission is 1 month. Now, more than a month has passed. Logically speaking, regardless of whether the mission is a success or a failure, they should all return to the outer court. Sitting on a chair in the room, Zhuowen bent the fingers on his right hand and gently looked at the table beside him. An ominous premonition rose in his heart. Finally, Zhuowen stood up and sent a few more messages into the communication jade token. However, these messages were like mud sinking into the sea. There were no ripples at all. At this moment, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with coldness. After which, Zhuowen took out another communication jade token. This communication jade token belonged to Chengdong from the Fragrant Ink Pavilion. After sending a message to Chengdong to confirm Chengdong's location, Zhuowen left his residence and flew towards Chengdong. In a rather quiet and elegant courtyard, a man in snow-white clothes walked with a mysterious footwork. He held a sword in his right hand. As he took a step forward, the long sword in his hand changed. His swordsmanship and footwork merged into one. He was like a dancing butterfly. Swoosh! A figure suddenly flew over and landed in the courtyard. It was a black-robed young man. This young man was Zhuowen, who had just come out from the bamboo forest residence. Senior Chengdong. Zhuowen cupped his hands and greeted politely. The white-clothed man slowly came to a halt. He turned around with a warm smile hanging from the corners of his mouth. He stared at Zhuowen in an indifferent manner and said, "Junior Zhuowen, why have you come this time?" "Senior Chengdong, this time, I'm really sorry for bothering you. However, I have no choice but to ask for your help," Zhuowen said solemnly. Seeing Zhuowen's expression, the smile on Chengdong's face faded. He knew that Zhuowen must have encountered some kind of problem. "Sit down and tell me slowly," Chengdong said to Zhuowen with a smile. Nodding his head, Zhuowen sat on a stone chair at the side and briefly explained the matter of Jianan, Mo Lingtian, and the other two. Zhuowen planned to borrow the power of the Fragrant Ink Pavilion that Chengdong was in to find out where Jianan and the other two were. Could it be that they had encountered danger during the mission? "I see. Junior Zhuowen, please don't be impatient. As your senior, I will instruct the members of the Fragrant Ink Pavilion to check on the situation of your 4 friends." Chengdong nodded his head solemnly. Soon after, he took out a jade talisman with his right hand and sent a message into it. Then, the jade talisman disappeared in midair along with the message. The members of the Fragrant Ink Pavilion should be able to find out about the situation of your 4 friends very soon. After doing this, Cheng Dong said with a smile. Zhuan nodded his head lightly and his heart calmed down slightly. As one of the 4 most powerful factions in the Outer Academy, the Fragrant Ink Pavilion's information-gathering ability was naturally extremely powerful. Zhuan could still trust them on this point. Zhuan and Cheng Dong sat opposite each other. They did not converse but instead silently waited for the information from the Fragrant Ink Pavilion. Soon after, a ray of light swept over from the horizon and instantly arrived above Cheng Dong. Cheng Dong waved his right hand and instantly, the ray of light was sucked into his hand. Soon after, he silently checked the information within the ray of light. Cheng Dong, who originally had a calm expression, suddenly frowned. Soon after, he glanced at Zhuan and a trace of pondering appeared in his eyes. Seeing the expression on Cheng Dong's face, Zhuan's gaze turned slightly serious. A trace of an ominous feeling rose in his heart and he hurriedly asked, "Senior Cheng Dong, what happened? Where are Jia Nan and the other 3 now?" "Brother Zhua, just now, I received information from a member of the Fragrant Ink Pavilion. It is said that Jia Nan, Gatha and Xian Xing were carrying out a mission in the West Path City in the northwest. However, during the mission, they unexpectedly had a conflict with the young master of the Xiaoyao sect, the largest faction in the West Path City. It is said that the 3 of them killed the young master and are now wanted by the Xiaoyao sect." At this point, Cheng Dong did not continue speaking. He knew that Zhuan was a smart person and would definitely be able to guess what had happened next. "Offended the Xiaoyao sect? Are they all right?" Zhuan suddenly asked. "Jia Nan and the others are not in any life-threatening danger. It is said that Gatha's armor spirit is very magical and actually helped them to avert danger many times. However, this has also angered the higher-ups of the Xiaoyao sect. It is said that the master of the Xiaoyao sect has come out of the mountain and wants to completely suppress the 3 of them." Cheng Dong continued. "The master of the Xiaoyao sect? What is his cultivation level?" Zhuan asked. "He is at the peak of the Holy Master realm and is very powerful. Moreover, there are 5 elders in the Xiaoyao sect who are at the Holy Master realm. There are 6 Holy Masters in the Xiaoyao sect. They are considered a tyrant in the northwest." Cheng Dong explained. "What about Mo Lingtian?" Zhuan asked again. Mo Lingtian has completed his mission and returned. However, after hearing about the 3 of them, he left for the West Path City 3 days ago. Cheng Dong said unhurriedly. Zhuan nodded. There was a trace of anxiety in his heart. He cupped his hands at Cheng Dong and said, "Senior Cheng Dong, thank you very much for this time. I will not stay for long. I have to go to the West Path City. Junior brother, be careful. This time, it's mainly because the 3 of them killed the young master of the Xiaoyao sect. The outer court is in the wrong. Although the higher-ups of the outer court knew that the 3 of them were being hunted, they did not lend a helping hand. This is the real reason. Therefore, the master of the Xiaoyao sect will not hold back just because you are a student of the Excellent God Academy." Cheng Dong cautiously reminded Zhuan. "Thank you for the reminder, senior." Zhuan cupped his hands and left the outer court. He directly flew towards the northwest direction. Zhuan had already exchanged for the map of the entire Excellent God Island when he entered the academy. This was so that he would not be confused when doing missions in the future. Looking at Zhuan's departing figure, Cheng Dong's eyes revealed a trace of interest. He muttered in a low voice, "Junior Zhuan's progress is really fast." During the freshman assessment, he was only at the late stage of the sovereign realm. Now, it's only been 2 months and he has already reached the early stage of the golden sovereign realm. His talent is really terrifying. The northwest area of Auspicious God Island was a desolate and uninhabited desert. In this desert, West Path City was the only place where people gathered. Many martial artists that passed by would basically come to West Path City to stay, replenish their rations and water. A figure instantly cut through the void and arrived at the gate of West Path City. It was a handsome young man with a cold gaze. At this moment, most of the cultivators at the gate were wearing gauze hats and strange white robes. They held onto their horses and entered the city under the inspection of the gate guards. Why is the inspection of West Path City so strict recently? It wasn't this strict in the past. Don't you know? It said that the young master of the Xiaoyao sect was killed. Now, the master of the Xiaoyao sect is going crazy and is looking for the murderer everywhere. What? Who has the guts to actually kill the young master of the Xiaoyao sect? Isn't that just courting death? You don't know. It said that the murderer came from the Excellent God Academy. Moreover, their cultivation isn't very high. It said that they are only at the Xuanzun realm level. However, among the three of them, two of them have armor souls that are not simple. They actually managed to escape the pursuit of the Xiaoyao sect. Moreover, because the three of them took the initiative to kill the young master of the Xiaoyao sect, the Excellent God Academy doesn't plan to step in for the three of them. It can be said that they have given up on the three of them. The two cultivators standing in line in front of Zhuowen suddenly began to whisper. At the same time, their eyes swept around, afraid that someone would hear what they were saying. Zhuowen, who was standing behind the two of them, frowned slightly. He knew the characters of Jianan and the other two. If no one provoked them, they would never attack or even kill. He always felt that there was something fishy about this. Chapter 1046. The man in the black robe. As the name implied, West Path City was a city that was opened up in the northwest region. The northwest region of Excellent God Island was extremely desolate. The person who opened West Path City was the first-generation sect master of the Carefree sect. He was a person with great perseverance and was loved and respected by many people in West Path City. In order to thank the first patriarch of the Xiaoyao sect, the Xiaoyao sect had erected a stone statue of the first patriarch in front of the mountain gate to thank him for his great achievements. However, as time went on, the Xiaoyao sect became more and more opinionated and self-opinionated. Many cultivators in West Trench City were dissatisfied and even complained. However, the Xiaoyao sect was too powerful. Even though there were complaints everywhere, the cultivators in West Trench City didn't dare to resist. They were angry but didn't dare to say anything. On the yellow dirt road, people came and went. Zhuan gazed at the surroundings of West Trench City. He was surprised at the prosperity of West Trench City. The northwest area of the wonderful Spirit Island was famous for being desolate, and for West Tuft City to be able to develop to this extent, it seemed that this carefree sect was not simple. However, Zhuowen did not notice the strands of worry between the brows of the residents of West Tuft City. Let's go to the restaurant and see if there's any news about Jianan and the others. Following the flow of people on the street, Zhuowen randomly found a restaurant and ordered a few dishes. He then sat there and drank by himself. At the same time, Yuan power gathered in his ears and captured all the sounds that could be heard in the restaurant. Have you heard? It said that the murderer of the Xiaoyao sect's young master has been caught. What? They caught him? The person who killed the young master must be very strong, right? It said that it's a young man. However, his cultivation isn't very high. He's only in the Xuanzun realm. I heard that there are still 2 accomplices who haven't been caught. However, the Xiaoyao sect's patriarch plans to bring this man to the Xiaoyao square and hang him in front of everyone. Zhuowen's wine glass suddenly froze as his pupils shrank. He never expected that one of the 3 had already been captured. Based on the description of the others, the one who had been captured was a young man. In that case, it was very likely that this person was Jianan. He wants to hang the murderer in front of everybody. I'm afraid the patriarch of the Xiaoyao sect wants to use him as bait to lure the other 2 out. You are the patriarch of the Xiaoyao sect, and you are using such despicable tricks. How ridiculous! Suddenly, a low and hoarse voice came from a rather remote corner of the restaurant. Then, everyone in the restaurant tacitly stopped talking and looked at the remote corner. At a table in a remote corner, a figure in a black robe and a black hat was silently drinking by himself. He seemed to be solitary and mysterious. Zhuowen's gaze also converged on the black-robed man. He kept having the feeling that the black-robed man's figure gave him a familiar feeling. Moreover, he could tell that the man's hoarse voice was deliberate. Who are you? How dare you insult the patriarch of the Xiaoyao sect? A figure stood up from a table in the middle of the restaurant. His cold gaze focused on the black-robed man in a remote corner. His voice was filled with chilliness. It's a disciple of the Xiaoyao sect. As soon as this figure stood up, a wave of discussion immediately sounded out in the surroundings. Their eyes were filled with fear and reverence. The carefree sect's influence in West Slope City was very great. The disciples of the carefree sect were extremely arrogant and despotic. The cultivators of West Slope City didn't dare to provoke these disciples. Zhuowen's gaze shifted to the disciple of the Xiaoyao sect who had just stood up. That disciple's cultivation level wasn't high. He was probably a supreme being. However, Zhuowen's gaze was focused on the table where the disciple of the Xiaoyao sect was sitting. There were 5 people at the table. They were wearing the same clothes as the disciple of the Xiaoyao sect. Those clothes were probably the uniforms of the Xiaoyao sect. Those 5 people's cultivation levels weren't bad. Among them, there was a handsome young man in white clothes. His chi was the strongest at the table. He was at the peak of the golden Zun layer. Next to the young man in white clothes was a beautiful young woman. She was also wearing the uniform of the Xiaoyao sect. She was probably a disciple of the Xiaoyao sect. What? Is the Xiaoyao sect not happy about this? Don't tell me that the patriarch of the Xiaoyao sect didn't want this? The man in black clothes slowly stood up. His eyes were as sharp as knives. The disciple of the Xiaoyao sect couldn't help but take a few steps back. Other than barking like a dog, what else can you do? Do you think you're qualified to be a disciple of the Xiaoyao sect? The man in black clothes said aggressively. The disciple of the Xiaoyao sect was furious. He shouted, "It seems like you don't know what's good for you. You dare to provoke the Xiaoyao sect again and again. Today, on behalf of the Xiaoyao sect, I'll teach you a lesson." When he finished talking, the disciple of the Xiaoyao sect jumped forwards and threw himself at the cultivator in the black Chong Pao. He raised his right hand and released a terrifying amount of pure qi. It looked like a pack of wolves were rushing towards the cultivator in the black Chong Pao. The man in the black robe stood up and waved his sleeve. A purple flame appeared in the air and blocked the attack. At the same time, the purple flame moved towards the disciple of the Xiaoyao sect and landed on his body. Ah! The disciple of the Xiaoyao sect gave a horrible shriek as he was enveloped by the purple flame. The temperature of the flame was so high that the disciple of the Xiaoyao sect was burnt to ashes. This. Everybody was staring at the disciple of the Xiaoyao sect who had been burnt to ashes. Then, they looked at the man in black clothes with fear in their eyes. It seemed like the man in black clothes who had provoked the patriarch of the Xiaoyao sect was not simple. A Zun disciple of the Xiaoyao sect had been killed by him. Looking at the purple flame released by the man in black clothes, Zhuowen's eyes twinkled. He smiled and silently watched the confrontation between the man in black clothes and the disciple of the Xiaoyao sect. At that moment, the atmosphere in the restaurant became strange and quiet. Not only the disciples of the Xiaoyao sect, but the cultivators of the other tables were also stunned. The man in black clothes was too presumptuous. He had killed the disciple of the Xiaoyao sect in front of everybody. He didn't put the Xiaoyao sect in his eyes. Bang! At the table in the middle of the restaurant, besides the man in white clothes and the pretty girl, the other 3 disciples of the Xiaoyao sect stood up. "Who are you? How dare you kill a disciple of the Xiaoyao sect?" A tall and thin disciple of the Xiaoyao sect glared at the man in black clothes. The 3 disciples of the Xiaoyao sect were much stronger than the one who had been killed. They were all at the initial Golden Zun stage. The 3 of them slowly stood up and surrounded the man in black clothes from 3 different directions. Their chi of the Golden Zun stage burst out like a volcano. It was terrifying. The moment the 3 of them surrounded the black-robed man, the cultivators at the surrounding tables all distanced themselves. They weren't strong, so if the battle between the 4 of them affected them, wouldn't it be a tragedy for them? Is it important who I am? I don't like the Xiaoyao sect, so I killed a few of your disciples. Can't I? The man in black clothes said in a hoarse voice. The 3 disciples of the Xiaoyao sect were astonished. The man in the black cloak was way too arrogant. He dared to kill a disciple of the Xiaoyao sect just because he didn't like them? It seems like you want to cause trouble. Since that's the case, don't blame us for being impolite. The tall and skinny man snorted coldly and gave the other two disciples a look. Suddenly, the three of them rushed toward the black-robed man in tacit understanding. At the same time, the three of them pulled out their respective swords. Immediately, the light of the swords filled the entire restaurant. The black-robed man lowered his head slightly and clapped his hands in the air. Suddenly, terrifying purple flames burst out and formed purple flowers. Purple flower bloom. A deep voice slowly sounded out. The purple flower formed by the purple flames slowly bloomed in the air. A terrifying power erupted, causing the temperature in the restaurant to rise to the extreme. Some of the weaker warriors had a slight change in their expressions and quickly retreated. As soon as the purple flower bloomed, the three disciples of the Xiaoyao sect were shocked. They jumped on the ground and released a terrifying amount of qi. Their swords danced in the air and turned into three gigantic sword shadows in the air. Boom! Boom! The sword shadow and the purple flame instantly collided as a muffled thunder-like explosion resounded. Soon after, the two suddenly came to a standstill in midair. Subsequently, a ring-shaped qi wave gushed out and spread outwards. The surrounding tables were lifted one after another by this qi wave and shattered into countless pieces of wood. They are in a stalemate. The man in black clothes is not simple. They are all initial golden exalts, but he is able to fight against three of them. He is not at a disadvantage. Everyone's pupils shrank when they saw that. They stared at the black-robed man in the purple flames with fear. The three disciples of the Xiaoyao sect were considered elites. They were all at the initial stage of the Golden Exalt realm. If they joined forces, they could fight against a mid-Golden Exalt realm cultivator. However, the man in black clothes was only an initial Golden Exalt. Yet he could easily block their combined attack. It was enough to show how terrifying he was. Purple flower explosion. Another shout was heard. Then, the blooming purple flowers exploded one by one. In an instant, the power of the explosion reached a terrifying level. The three disciples of the Xiaoyao sect who were fighting against the three sword shadows were shocked when they felt the power of the explosion. They pushed their yuan qi to the maximum and tried to suppress the power of the explosion. A crisp sound was heard. Then, the three sword shadows were shattered by the power of the explosion. The three disciples of the Xiaoyao sect were pushed back and their faces turned pale. Die! The man in black clothes shouted. He took a step forward and the purple flames surrounded him flew towards the three disciples of the Xiaoyao sect. He wanted to kill them. Swoosh! Chapter 1047. By Yi Shuibang. Caught off guard, the black-robed man was hit in the chest by the shadow. With a grunt, he spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered a few steps back. It was only then that the crowd realized that the shadow was actually a scabbard. The scabbard floated in front of the three Xiaoyao sect disciples as if it was alive. Thank you, eldest senior brother, for your help. The three Xiaoyao sect disciples stared at the scabbard in front of them before bowing respectfully to the white-robed man at the table behind them. This person is actually Xiaoyao sect's eldest disciple, Bai Yishue. Bai Yishue usually appears and disappears unpredictably. He actually has the leisure to drink with other disciples in the restaurant today. Just as the three Xiaoyao sect disciples finished speaking, they attracted the attention of the other people at the table. Obviously, Bai Yishue was very famous in West Trench City. Otherwise, the crowd would not have reacted so violently when his name was mentioned. Zhuowen's gaze naturally fell on Bai Yishue as well. When the first Xiaoyao sect disciple had shouted earlier, Nguyen had already noticed that Bai Yishue's cultivation base was not weak, having reached the pinnacle of the Golden Venerable Realm. He did not expect him to be the eldest disciple of Xiaoyao sect. What? Isn't it enough that you've killed one of my Xiaoyao sect's disciples? Do you want to kill more? Bai Yishue slowly raised the wine cup in his hand and drained it in one gulp as he spoke faintly. The black-robed man steadied himself, his gaze solemn. Bai Yixue was a pinnacle golden venerable realm expert after all. His ability was much stronger than his own. Just the strike earlier was already difficult for him to withstand. It was truly terrifying. I don't think I'm the one who started this. It was your Xiaoyao sect's disciple who provoked me first. Don't you think it's an insult to Xiaoyao sect's reputation now that you're bullying me with your numbers? The black-robed man sneered coldly. Bai Yixue smiled faintly, his gaze not on the black-robed man. Instead, his left hand pinched the chin of the beautiful girl who was leaning against him while his right hand raised the wine cup to pour himself a drink. He said faintly, Xiaoyao sect's disciples provoked you because we thought highly of you. Killing you is giving you face. Not only are you not grateful to Xiaoyao sect, but you're also slandering us. I think you don't know the ways of the world. Provoking me because you think highly of me? Killing me is giving me face? What a domineering Xiaoyao sect. Do you really think you can defeat me? If I want to leave, you can't stop me. The black-robed man snorted coldly. His entire body was covered in purple flames. He took a step forward and rushed toward the entrance of the restaurant. He wanted to escape from the restaurant. Escape? Do you think you can escape? Bai Yixue's lips curled into a cold smirk. With a point of his right hand, the scabbard hovering in front of him was pulled abruptly. The sharp longsword contained within was unsheathed, turning into a ray of sword light that shot towards the black-robed man. The terrifying sword light was like the bright moonlight in the night sky, emitting a cold light, giving people a bone-chilling feeling. The speed of the sword light was very fast, and it arrived in front of the black-robed man in an instant. Then, the long sword danced and a terrifying sword chi burst out, forming layers of terrifying sword screens, blocking in front of the black-robed man. The black-robed man's expression changed slightly. Purple flames rushed out and formed a huge purple hand. It fell from the sky and crushed the sword light coming from the front and back. Swoosh. Unfortunately, the sword light was too terrifying. The huge hand formed by purple flames was chopped off the moment it came into contact with the sword light, turning into countless purple flames that dissipated in the air. Swoosh. The sword light continued forward, arriving in front of the black-robed man in an instant. It stood on the purple flames on the black-robed man's body. Boom! A terrifying sound was heard. The black-robed man snorted and retreated dozens of steps under the sword light. He was actually forced back by the sword light. What are you three junior brothers still looking at? It's better to kill such an arrogant fellow. Bai Yixue spat out the words calmly, his voice containing a deep murderous intent. Eldest senior brother is right. The three disciples of the Xiaoyao sect clasped their hands in front of their chests. They were overjoyed. They jumped forwards and chased after the cultivator in the black cloak. In a flash, they caught up with the cultivator in the black cloak. The three of them joined hands again and surrounded the cultivator in the black cloak. Three gigantic swords descended from the sky towards the cultivator in the black cloak. The man in the black robe looked gloomy. He raised both of his hands and an endless amount of purple flames appeared. The purple flames roared like the waves of an ocean. They rolled up layer by layer as if they wanted to kill the three disciples of the Xiaoyao sect. Just as the purple flames were about to completely cover the three Xiaoyao sect's disciples, another sword light came and slammed into the terrifying purple flame waves. The purple flame waves collapsed instantly, turning into fine powder. The black-robed man snorted again and retreated a few steps. Taking advantage of the black-robed man's retreat, the three Xiaoyao sect's disciples did not let go of this opportunity. They quickly launched an attack, attacking the black-robed man mercilessly, causing the black-robed man to be slightly exhausted. Every time the black-robed man unleashed a powerful purple flame, wanting to repel the three Xiaoyao sect's disciples, Bai Yixue would control his sword and extinguish the purple flame, rendering the black-robed man's attack useless. Many martial artists in the restaurant frowned when they saw the scene. The Xiaoyao sect was despicable. Three disciples of the Xiaoyao sect ganged up on an initial stage golden honored realm martial artist, and that was already bullying him with numbers. Now, the Xiaoyao sect's eldest disciple, Bai Yixue, had interfered, breaking the black-robed man's attacks time and time again, forcing the black-robed man into a passive state of defense. Most practitioners knew that if the black-robed man continued to defend passively, he would not be able to last long. Eventually, he would be defeated. In addition, many of the martial artists in the tavern were contemptuous of Bai Yishue's participation as well. Of course, no one would express such feelings. The carefree sex tyranny in West Trench City was well known. They did not want to get into trouble. Die! The three Xiaoyao sect's disciples laughed maliciously. The black-robed man was already weak and his defense was full of flaws. The three Xiaoyao sect's disciples began to strengthen their attacks, almost completely suppressing the black-robed man. Watching the scene, the crowd in the restaurant sighed. They could clearly feel that the black-robed man would not be able to hold on for long. He would be defeated in a few moves. Xiaoyao sect. How despicable! The black-robed man roared angrily. He took out a jade talisman with a mysterious pattern engraved on its surface and crushed it. A jade-colored light wrapped around it. After which, it turned into a ray of light and shot out of the restaurant at an extremely fast speed. Oh no! It's the wind talisman. I didn't expect this guy to have something like this. Stop him. The three disciples of the Xiaoyao sect saw the talisman in the man's hand and shouted loudly. The three sword shadows that were floating in the air rushed towards the man in the black robe. They wanted to stop him from leaving the Xiaoyao sect. Unfortunately, the black-robed man's speed was too fast with the help of the wind talisman. The attacks of the three Xiaoyao sect's disciples could not catch up with the black-robed man at all, only landing on his afterimage. Eldest senior brother. Seeing that their attacks had been dodged, the three Xiaoyao sect's disciples looked gloomy. Bai Yishue narrowed his eyes and sneered, I knew that this guy might have a trump card to escape. He can't escape from the restaurant. As he spoke, Bai Yishue's right hand formed a sword spell. Instantly, a terrifying sword light erupted from the restaurant's entrance. The sword light was like an upside-down waterfall, floating up and filling the air with sword energy, blocking the black-robed man who was trying to escape from the restaurant's entrance. Damn it! Break it! The black-robed man's expression finally changed. He did not expect Bai Yishue to set up such a waterfall of sword light at the restaurant's entrance. With a cold snort, he clenched his right hand into a fist, the surface of which was covered in purple flame. With a punch, the air seemed to be scorched. Boom! The force of the punch arrived, crashing onto the waterfall of sword light. A terrifying shockwave spread out, causing the entire restaurant to tremble. The waterfall of sword light at the entrance was as still as a mountain, while the black-robed man was forced to take a few steps back. Swoosh! A sword light came again, as if it had traveled through the void, arriving in front of the black-robed man in an instant, wanting to cut him in half. I'm not playing with you anymore. You should just die. As the sword light swept out, Bai Yishue's indifferent voice could be heard. Violet flower, bloom. The black-robed man shouted angrily, starting to fight with all his might. Bai Yishue's ability was much stronger than his. The power of the sword light made him feel a fatal threat. Purple flame flowers bloomed one after another, gathering in front of the black-robed man, protecting him. The sword light was swift, like a dazzling meteor that streaked across the night sky, arriving in front of the purple flame flowers in an instant. With a flick, the purple flame flowers withered and were destroyed. Violet flower explosion. The black-robed man's gaze was extremely solemn. With a low growl, the purple flame flowers around him began to explode. The terrifying explosive force spread out, causing the entire restaurant to shake even more violently. Bai Yishue's indifferent voice rang out. The incoming sword light grew stronger and more terrifying, like a blazing sun as it slashed out. The exploding violet flower explosion was completely annihilated by the terrifying sword light. The violet flower explosion was destroyed. The black-robed man stomped his feet and retreated, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Bai Yishue was not going to let him off easily. With a pinch of his sword spell, the terrifying sword light descended from the sky, falling towards the black-robed man's head, wanting to pierce through it completely. This person is dead for sure. Everyone in the restaurant fell silent when they saw this. They just stared at the scene quietly. They knew very well just how terrifying this streak of light was. The black-robed man could not block it at all. He was probably dead for sure. Even the black-robed man's gaze was filled with despair. The sword light was indeed terrifying. A sense of helplessness rose within him. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.